Coil consented, and the angel took him through the mountain and showed him all the wonderful things he would find as he tunneled into this holy mountain. They went through tunnels, drifts and shafts, as if they were already made. He saw water at 300 feet, a black vein at 410 feet, a rusty iron-colored ore at 1,300 feet, a map of North America at 1,800 feet, a cream-colored vein 3 inches wide on the left side of the tunnel, an opening up on the right side, and by following that 20 feet he would strike a perpendicular vein that would dip down to a rich vein of gold ore that would have to be sacked to save the riches. Then at 2,000 feet he would strike a vein 3 inches wide on the north, 18 inches on the south with a beautiful hard slick wall. This vein would lead into 5 fingers each leading into rich bodies of gold and quartz. At 2,200 feet, he would strike water that would fill a ditch in the tunnel along the track, and near the end of the tunnel he would find a chimney of soft material that would lead down to a capstone of hard rock that would be so hard it would take a month to go through this 3-foot layer. Beneath this capstone he would find a rich white quartz vein that would lead to the 9 rooms where the ancient Nephites worked and left large crock jars full of coins and a lot of other items including tools, records, etc. These things in the tunnel are there to be seen by all who desire to check the report. The tunnel that went into Water Canyon was open when they first went and investigated, but was covered up by a cloudburst flood soon after. The time had come to get the work started, and Coyle was instructed to get Brockbank, his brother-in-law, to go help him stake out the claims and open up the mine, because Coyle didn't know how to locate or stake the claims. After a lot of persuasion they went up with team and buggy. The road was washed out, and they had to walk. When they got up on Knob Hill, they sat down to rest a bit. As they scanned the mountain, a light shone on the wide hill brighter than the sunlight. Coyle said, "Can you see what I am looking at?" They both saw the same thing. Coyle said, "Go and stick this pick in the ground where you see it." He did, and by digging down 18 inches, they found a vein of ore that assayed gold. That was the place to sink a shaft. They went down 1,385 feet. And it took 22 men to work and pull that muck out by hand. It was winter with snow waist deep on the mountain, and Coyle had a dream that he was to go down to the face of the mountain and start a tunnel. There will be 2 bare spots. The bottom one will be the size of a tunnel on the spot where you shall make the opening. When the men came to the house for breakfast, Coyle told them the dream. They laughed and said, "There are no bare spots on this mountain. This is one dream that will fail." Coyle and 2 husky doubters headed down the face into the draw. The snow was soft and up to their armpits in places. Lars Olsen was first to the scene and yelled, "Here it is, sure enough. We'll dig the tunnel here." Coyle was still a true prophet. Right away they took the bunkhouse apart and skidded it over snow by hand, down the steep mountain, and set it back together on its present site. They started the tunnel and followed instructions in order to find all the things Coyle had been shown. He had to take hold of a maple tree with one hand and lean out as far as he could reach and go straight into the mountain. They struck water at 300 feet, just like he saw it in his first visit. They dug a hole big enough to dip a bucket full of water from. It would never run over, yet it would supply all their needs. The bunkhouse caught fire one morning, and with a bucket brigade, they dipped enough water to put the fire out and saved the house. All was enough, but never a surplus according to the promise. Coyle had a farm in Idaho and wanted to go there to look after things and enjoy a vacation, so he put Peter Carlston in charge of the mine and went to the farm. Sometime later he was sitting in the living room and heard a conversation between Peter Carlston and others. They were planning to let the claims go delinquent and then jump them and take over. Coyle got on the ball and went to Salt Lake to Peter's home and told him what was going on. Peter denied it several times. Then his wife in the kitchen spoke up and said, "Peter, stop your lying. You know you did." Then he broke down and confessed. Peter and Fred Bangerter got a large block of stock in the settlement. Coyle said it would never do them any good, and Fred and Peter are gone, and Fred is off the hill. Bishop Coyle was highly favored of the Lord with the gift of prophecy and discernment between friends and enemies. He would talk freely with friends and close up like a clam in the presence of enemies. Oftentimes he was forewarned. Once complaints were made against Coyle accusing him of selling worthless stock. Mr. Gull for the state said, "I'll take care of him and put him behind prison bars in 1 month." Bishop Coyle said, "Don't worry, he is the one that will be behind prison bars." As it turned out, Mr. Gull was put in prison for fraudulent dealings in stock. Coyle was called in, by revelation, to go before the prophet and receive his second anointing, which is a blessing few men get. This put him beyond the authority of earthly men subject only to the power and dictates of the Lord. At one time a number of people in Spanish Fork became overpowered and possessed by evil spirits. When others failed to heal them, Bishop Coyle was called in. Through his faith and command, the Lord drove out the evil spirits. On one occasion they went out of one person, crossed the street, and possessed a woman. She was also relieved by the laying on of hands of Bishop Coyle. Bishop Coyle was shown that the boys working in the mine were fooling around, pushing, jerking each other and acting badly, and that if they didn't stop it, someone would be killed. He called them in and warned them several times, but they would not heed. One day a gardener boy was fooling on a ladder and slipped, and fell 200 feet to his death. The bishop and Lars Olsen were working in a tunnel one day. They were only a short distance in, and were taking turns at drilling with a single jackhammer. While one drilled, the other would sit on a powder box at the entrance. They heard voices and conversation going up the trail and over the mountain. They could see no one, nor understand what they said. They felt strange and uneasy, and neither of them wanted to sit on the box, but would insist on drilling. 20 years later 2 angels came to Bishop Coyle in the night and awoke him from sleep. The room lightened up bright as day. They reminded him of the time he and Lars heard voices near the tunnel and said, "We are the ones you heard. We are watching over this mine and have it in charge." They talked for 2 full hours about the greatness of the mission of the mine for future generations. The biggest thing in all the world, and then they told him never to tell a living soul what was said in the hour and a half, but he could tell the first half hour which pertained to the bishop's work. The bishop's wife, pled with him to tell her the hour and a half story. He said, "Are you a living soul?" She said, "Yes." "Then I can't tell it to you." Then one beautiful day 2 very close friends of the bishop's came over from Mapleton. He broke silence and told the hour and a half secret. Overflowing with joy and excitement the 2 got into the buggy and headed for home. As they jogged along, one of them said, "What did the bishop tell us?" Neither of them could remember one thing he said. What he was told was too sacred for this corrupt generation, but will be revealed to a righteous millennium people prepared to do God's will in all things. The half hour was that part which covered the bishop's work and mission. When the messengers come to remain and oversee the work, the wicked will not be able to get off the hill fast enough. Elder Talmage was sent to make a report on the mine. When he met with the men, he said, "I have 2 satchels, one scientific and the other apostolic. I have my scientific one today." He was rated as one of the 7 greatest scientists in the world. He looked over the mountain and in the tunnel without finding anything showing that would indicate values worth mining. He then told the miners that they should pray to the Lord to show them what was right. The men said, "We have done that and received a testimony that it is true, just as sure as our testimony of the church is true." The sincerity of their testimonies puzzled Elder Talmage, and he said, "Brethren, pray for me." His report to the church was negative and caused a lot of trouble for Bishop Coyle and his family in the form of mockery and persecution. After Brother Talmage died, he came back to Bishop Coyle and said, "Brother Coyle, I was the cause of the trouble and persecution heaped upon you and your family, and I cannot go on until I make things right. Will you forgive me and release me from this burden?" Bishop said, "With all my heart. I forgive you freely." Moses and Joseph Smith appeared to Bishop Coyle and gave him instructions which he did not divulge or say much about. Moses said, "I hope you don't have as much trouble with Israel as I had." When Bishop told this to us, Parley Pierce said, "If you are the one like Moses, you will not bring the mine in to deliver Israel from bondage and lead them into the land of promise." Nothing more was said. The bishop was reading the Doctrine and Covenants one morning, and at 10 o'clock he thought, "It's time to go into the mine and see what has showed up." He put the book on a shelf, took his lamp and walked up the trail toward the mine. He heard a voice say, "Go back and read section 111, it pertains to this place." He stopped, looked all around, but could see no one, so he started walking again. 3 times this was repeated, so he went back and read, "I the Lord your God am not displeased with your coming this journey, your life's journey, notwithstanding your follies, Coil's follies. I have much treasure in this city, ancient, for you for the benefit of Zion, and many people in this city, whom I will gather out in due time for the benefit of Zion, through your instrumentality. Therefore, it is expedient that you should form acquaintance with men in this city, as you shall be led, and as it shall be given you. The men and inhabitants are the 3 immortal Nephites and their people. And it shall come to pass in due time that I will give this city unto your hands, that you shall have power over it, insomuch that they shall not discover your secret parts, and its wealth pertaining to gold and silver shall be yours. Zion's. Concern not yourselves about your debts, for I will give you power to pay them, gold and silver from the mine. Concern not yourselves about Zion, for I will deal mercifully with her, will gather the elect to a city of righteousness. Tarry in this place and in the regions around about, in Utah County and around about. And the place where it is my will that you should tarry, for the main, shall be signalized unto you by the peace and power of my Spirit that shall flow unto you, a holy city by the mine. This place you may obtain by hire men to dig the gold and silver mining, and inquire diligently concerning the more ancient inhabitants and founders of this city. The ancient inhabitants are the Nephites. Therefore, be ye as wise as serpents, and yet without sin, and I will order all things for your good as fast as you are able to receive them. According to Bishop, a messenger told us, when the time and the conditions are right, you will have the ore and all the wealth you need. The conditions would be a few trustworthy people gathered out, a financial crash, transportation stopped, civil strife, foreclosures on debts, banks closed, worthless paper money, etc. There will be a 7-year period of changing conditions preceding the crash that will cause much suffering. The first year will have good crops, the second also, but the third year crops would suffer from drought, and the wheat would be shrunken and fit only for animal feed, and the fourth year would be a total failure, when there would not be enough for seed to plant the next year. If we get riches out of the mine, the first or second year we can get good wheat, but if we wait until the third year, we are too late. Bishop saw that he went up and down this country with plenty of money, but could buy no wheat anywhere. Another set of changes would climax this period. The U.S. government will collapse, and there won't be a responsible power to collect taxes. The mine will come forth with wealth in the LDS. Church will be set in order with a new set of officials, and a return to the original laws and ordinances that were given to Joseph Smith in their true form. Joseph Smith said, if any man preach any gospel than this which I have preached, let him be accursed, yea, though he were an angel from heaven, and preach any other gospel than this which I have preached, let him be accursed. Bishop was carried in the spirit into the spirit world, where he saw beauty beyond anything he had ever seen on earth. The homes were neat, well arranged and surrounded with gardens of flowers that defied description, rare and brilliant colors not seen on earth. As he walked up the path toward a T-shaped house, his father, who had been dead a number of years, came out on the walk and greeted him with a hearty welcome. He said, John, I want you to go back to earth and teach the gospel to your brothers and sisters, and see that they repent and go to the temple and be sealed for time and eternity. Tell Harry if he doesn't quit his profanity and getting drunk, he will get an awful shaking up. John came back and went to work teaching and working with them, and they all were obedient, but Harry, who was stubborn and unwilling. John said to him, I have warned you these 3 times, and if you don't straighten up, you will be punished with an awful shaking up. The warning was like pouring water on a duck. He paid no heed until one day he was going up the trail in Flat Canyon taking supplies up to his sheep camp. He was walking, leading the pack horses through the oaks, when suddenly an unseen power seized him and shook him with such fury that when he clung to the oaks, it tore the flesh off his hands. That changed his whole life. He quit drinking and went to the temple and had his wife and children all sealed to him for eternity. Bishop had a dream that the banks all over the United States would close in 1 month. He went to the Spanish Fork Bank and told the president to get his business in shape fast because the bank will close in 30 days. President Gardner smiled and said, we are okay and such a thing can't happen. The United States is back of us. At the end of the month, Bishop was walking past the bank and President Gardner called Bishop in and said, Bishop, a month is gone and everything is lovely. Bishop said, just wait. I still have 1 more day. Call me tomorrow. Early the next morning, President Roosevelt declared a bank holiday and all banks had to close. In World War I, everybody over the country was talking about the highly efficient 145th Artillery. Bishop said they would never see action. The word came that the 145th unit would go into action tomorrow. There were big headlines in the papers. A man from Salt Lake grabbed his paper and went to Bishop Coyle to prove him wrong, but Bishop said calmly, they will not see action. Wait and see. The next day the armistice was signed and the war was over. Bishop Coyle was told by an angel to search the prophecies of Isaiah and put faithfully into practice the instructions given there. On Thursday we would fast all day and put in a full day's work. Then at 7:30 p.m. we would meet and pray for the Lord to deliver us. Isaiah 56:1-3, thus saith the Lord, keep ye judgment and do justice. For my salvation is near to come, and my righteousness to be revealed. Blessed is the man that doeth this, and the Son of Man, that layeth hold on it, that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and keepeth his hand from doing any evil. Isaiah 57:7. Upon a lofty and high mountain hast thou set thy bed, even thither wentest thou up to offer sacrifice of time, labor, and his whole life to the bringing forth relief for a time of trouble, drought and famine. 8. Behind the doors also and the posts hast thou set up thy remembrance, calling upon the Lord, for thou hast discovered thyself to another than me, and art gone up. Thou hast enlarged thy bed, built a new home, and made thee a covenant with them, stockholders. Thou lavest their bed where thou sawest it. He built a bunkhouse high upon the mountain where the workers boarded and slept. Then he had a night vision of a larger house at the foot of the mountain, with a porch and 2 porch posts. 9. And thou wentest to the King, Jesus Christ, with ointment ... and didst debase thyself even unto hell. He listened to spiritual mediums. This was a time of trouble for Bishop Coil. He was deceived into paying John Harper and his 2 partners a sum of money for a fake process for extracting metals from ore. 10. Thou art wearied in the greatness of thy way, yet saidst thou not, there is no hope, thou hast found the life of thine hand, therefore, thou was not grieved. 11. And of whom hast thou been afraid or feared, that thou hast lied, and hast not remembered me, nor laid it to thy heart? Have I not held my peace even of old, and thou fearest me not? Bishop feared the authorities would excommunicate him, so he signed a big lie document. 12. I will declare thy righteousness, and thy works, for they shall not profit thee. 13. When thou criest, let thy companies, stockholders, deliver thee. But the wind shall carry them all away, vanity shall take them. But he that putteth his trust in me shall possess the land, and shall inherit my holy mountain. 14. And shall say, cast ye up, prepare the way, take up the stumbling block out of the way of my people. Uncover lies, false doctrine, and give them the truth. 15. For thus saith the high and lofty one that inhabiteth eternity, whose name is holy, I dwell in the high and holy place, with him also that is of a contrite and humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble, and to revive the heart of the contrite ones. Isaiah 58:4-14. Behold, ye fast for strife and debate, and to smite with the fist of wickedness. Bishop would tell us things that were not for the public. He would say, keep your mouth shut. But the men would go out and tell a friend, and he his friend, and soon it was broadcast to all. This made the bishop angry, and he would storm at the next meeting with threats of punishment, and as he would pound the table with his fist of wickedness, he would say, by hell it has got to stop, or you can't be one with us. Ye shall not fast as ye do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. 5. Is it such a fast that I have chosen? A day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his dead as a bulrush, and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Wilt thou call this a fast, and an acceptable day to the Lord? Your iniquities have separated between you and your God, that he will not hear. 6. Is not this the fast that I have chosen? To loose the hands of wickedness, bondage temporally and spiritually. Remorse is a burden you cannot lay upon the pure and innocent, neither can you lift it from the hearts of the guilty, for in the night shall it return that man may wake, and gaze upon himself. There is no peace to the wicked. 7. Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor, that are cast out to thy house? When thou seest the naked, that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh? This is the purpose and mission of the relief mine. The poor and the meek shall inherit the earth. He that putteth his trust in me shall possess the land, and shall inherit my holy mountain. 8. Then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thine health shall spring forth speedily, and thy righteousness shall go before thee. The glory of the Lord shall be thy reward. 9. Then shalt thou call, and the Lord shall answer. Thou shalt cry, and he shall say, Here I am. If thou take away from the midst of thee the yoke, the putting forth of the finger and speaking vanity, the signing of a check for several $1,000s in a fraud of deception was to be made good, exposed and corrected without excuse or justification. 10. And if thou draw out thy soul to the hungry, and satisfy the afflicted soul, then shall thy light rise in obscurity, and thy darkness be as the noonday. 11. And the Lord shall guide thee continually, and satisfy thy soul in drought, and make fat thy bones, and thou shalt be like a watered garden, and like a spring of water, whose waters fail not. The bishop was told that the water in the hill would satisfy all our needs during the years of famine and drought. 12. And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places, thou shalt rise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in. 13. If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord, honorable, and shalt honor him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words. 14. Then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Jacob thy father, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. Isaiah 57:16-21. For I will not contend forever, neither will I be always wroth, for the spirit should fail before me, and the souls which I have made. To qualify, one must come with a broken heart and a contrite spirit, put away vanity, pride, boasting, self-righteousness, and have full unwavering confidence in the Most High God. 17. For the iniquity of his covetousness was I wroth, and smote him. I hid me, and was wroth, and he went on forwardly in the way of his heart. Do as I say. I am running things. Obedience to me is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. 18. I have seen his ways, and will heal him, I will lead him also, and restore comforts unto him, and to his mourners, signifying his death. 20. But the wicked are like the troubled sea when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. 21. There is no peace, saith my God, to the wicked. Isaiah 58:1-3. Cry loud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgression, and the house of Jacob their sins. 2. Yet they seek me daily, in prayer, etc., and delight to know my ways, as a nation that did righteousness, and forsook not the ordinance of their God, would not stand for the changing of the ordinances of the gospel, not transgressing the law. They ask of me the ordinances of justice, they take delight in approaching to God, fasting and praying often. 3. Wherefore have we fasted, say they, and thou seest not? Wherefore have we afflicted our soul, and thou takest no knowledge? Behold, in the day of your fast ye find pleasure, and exact all your labors. We worked all day Thursdays with fasting and prayer, with long prayer meetings in the evening. Isaiah 59:1-3. Behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened, that it cannot save, neither his ear heavy, that it cannot hear. 2. But your iniquities have separated between you and your God, and your sins have hid his face from you, that he will not hear. 3. For your hands are defiled with blood, and your fingers with iniquity, your lips have spoken lies, your tongue hath muttered perverseness. If we rebel against Christ and will not believe his word, we make his word a lie, and that is blasphemy. We crucify him anew unto ourselves, and his blood is upon our hands. 1. Golden Kimball was shown that he was to get 500 shares of Dream Mine stock, and it was revealed to Bishop Coil that he was to give J. Golden Kimball 500 shares of stock, whether he had any money or not. The idea kept working on Brother Kimball, so he decided to go and have a talk with Brother Coil. And when he went and talked to him, he said, "It has been made known to me that I should get 500 shares of Dream Mine stock." The bishop said, "I know it," and gave him the certificate that had already been made out, waiting for him to come and get it. My experience with John H. Coyle. While teaching school in Fairview, I heard that John H. Coyle had been visited by the 3 immortal Nephites, one of whom gave him a mission from the Lord to open a rich gold mine. It had once been operated by the ancient Nephites until they became so wicked that the Lord took it from them and destroyed them. The following poem, given to Afton Waters while he was working in the mine in Eureka, tells the reason why. An angel came to Bro. Waters one night and gave him this sacred bit of history. I stood at the open portal of a tunnel peculiarly grand, and the patience required in its digging was famed through all the land. And one of an ancient nation stood guard at the entry there. Hollow though stern was his visage, snow white were his beard and hair. With a guide I entered the tunnel, its cavernous depths to explore, and as we hastened forward, I felt as I never had felt before. For I knew there was perfect safety, and that I had nothing to fear, for those with motives untainted were protected in working there. Near a winze at the end of the tunnel stood another of solemn mien, stern-visaged and armed with saber, as he at the portal had been. And as we passed onward and downward, each landing was guarded the same, until with curious motives prompted, I asked, "Friend, what is thy name? And why dost thou and thy brother stand guard at these workings old? Perhaps in the depths below us are uncounted treasures of gold?" To my query he thus made answer, "Son of earth, thou hast rightly said, for I and my brothers are remnants of a nation long since dead. Ages gone, when we dwelt among mortals, These mountains were teeming with wealth, and the Father was granting our people peace, wisdom, great riches and health. In the pride of their hearts, they forsook him and worshipped but mammon alone, till their sins reached upward to heaven. And earth neath corruption did groan. TWAS then that the Spirit ceased striving and left them to darkness once more, for every man's hand smote his neighbor, and destruction was rapid and sure. And then when the Master was dying, and earth neath convulsions did lie, the wealth in these mountains was hidden from an evil and covetous eye. The wealth in these mountains of Ephraim, thus saith the Father, is mine, and all who partake of its fatness, I own it by right most divine. This then is preserved for a people prepared to accomplish his will, the wealth which the Father hath hidden beneath this once notable hill. We are guarding the wealth in the worker, that corruption shall not allure the toiler who enters this tunnel with motives unselfish and pure. But the Father's purposes will ripen, though derision and scoffers abound, and coming from sources unthought of, dark clouds hover closely around. I awoke from my sleep and my dreaming, and sought my companion again, but naught could I see but the mountain, and the place where my visit had been. But I knew that the wealth that was hidden from a nation now under the sod must be used as the prophet hath bidden, for the glorification of God. Brother Waters thought he was to open and work this mine, but he got no direction as to where and how to find it till one day, while in Spanish Fork someone asked him to go to the annual Dream Mine meeting that was being held on the hill that day. He went gladly. When he saw the mine tunnel, he was greatly surprised and thrilled, for it was the very thing the messenger had shown him in the dream. He took the poem out of his pocket, handed it to Bishop Coil and said, "Here, Bishop, this belongs to you. It's your work and mission, to bring relief to the people in time of great need and trouble." Bishop Coyle gladly received the wonderful new testimony to the divinity of his great mission and work. At this time they were having difficulty getting expense money, so Junius Pierce said, "Bishop, if you will let me have that poem, I'll go out and get some money for you." He took it home that evening, and next morning when he came back to work, Bishop said, "I decided not to let you have that poem," so Junius handed it to him and said, "I don't need it anymore, because I memorized it last night." This poem points the way to success and the riches of the earth, and also the riches of eternity, if we will but worship and serve the rightful owner of the same. It also points the way to death and destruction, if in our pride we turn from the Lord and worship but mammon alone. A messenger appeared to Bishop Coyle when he was discouraged and calling for help, and showed him a rich body of ore and said, "Does that satisfy you?" To which he said, "Yes." Then the messenger said, "Now turn and look the other way. Now turn back and look." The ore was gone, buried up with a great rock slide. The messenger then said, "That is what will happen when the mine comes in, if envy and strife, jealousy, and greed enter in, and you can put your men to work, but they will never find it." Bishop Coyle was shown in a night vision that he was traveling along a road, life's highway. Then it divided into two roads, and he did not know which to take. Then a messenger appeared and said, "If you take the right road, everything will be all right, but if you follow the wrong road, you will have trouble plenty. One road leads to success, the other to disappointment." Mary Minor, a distant relative of mine, was living in California, taking care of the LDS missionaries. A stranger entered into the work helping the elders, which made for great success. Mary was so impressed with him and the work that she thought he was more than ordinary. She asked the Lord about him, and it was revealed to her that he was one of the 3 Nephites, and his name was Zedekiah. She asked him to go to Provo and see her brother, which he did. He came to the Minor farm while they were in town shopping. As they came into the farm, he walked out to meet them. They, Melvin and Zed, as he called himself, became close and dear friends. He had great power to do things that frightened some and pleased others. He would tell them to look, and they would see visions of spiritual things of rich beauty. He wrote many revelations concerning the saints and the tribes sitting in darkness, who would be favored of the Lord in these days of fulfillment, when the more faithful shall see an angel from the Lord, even Moroni, descending in a cloud as of old. To which thing you must bear solemn and sober witness not many days hence. You shall know, if you are faithful, and shall see his power. As he parts the clouds of glory in that solemn hour, I shall show the heavenly records wrought on plates of gold. If you hasten, and make ready as you have been told. Lo, I come to do the bidding of my God and King, to show to the prophet records I must bring. May man dictate to his Maker what the Lord can do. Surely from the lowest station Christ has come to you. Priest or priestess, man or woman, dare man name the sex. Prophetess or prophet judging and my spirit vex. Keep your faith ever burning bright, is the Lord's command, and your eyes shall see those records from Moroni's hand. This is a sample of the things he wrote which were not for the public at present. Mapleton needed a school teacher badly, so Zed applied, and got the job. By Christmas time his class could pass the test for the entire year. He was so outstanding that jealousies and hate were stirred up to the point where two fellows plotted to kill him. The plot was revealed to Zed that these two were lying in wait with a shotgun in some shrubs by the path he usually walked home on. At the warning, Zed turned back and went another way, thus thwarting their evil plan. But persecution increased, and a complaint was issued for his arrest. The sheriff arrested him and put him in Provo City Jail. When the keeper shut the steel door and locked it, the door flew open. This he did several times, not being able to lock Zed in, but he did not try to leave. John Roundy, a temple official and a dear friend of Zed's, came over from Spanish Fork to visit him in jail. They went back home in a heavy snowstorm, and when they opened the door of their home, there sat Zed by the fireplace. He had entered without making any track in the fresh snow that was 6 inches deep. The jailer was indeed glad to get rid of him. Will Roundy, a son of John, went with Zed to the Dream Mine and around the valley in search of 6 special witnesses, highly favored to have this privilege. He could tell by shaking hands with them whether they were the right ones and trustworthy. I was surprised at some he rejected whom I figured would pass. He met with the 6 and gave them instructions and information that they would not divulge. But they were pale as ghosts when they got through. Zed said to them, I have work in California that must be attended to at once. So he left saying, I will write from the west. 2 days later they got a letter from him that was postmarked by a postmaster in California 2 hours after he left Spanish Fork. There were no airplanes in those days. While Zed was here, the Lord told him to go to President Joseph F. Smith to receive certain blessings. He went to the president's office and was invited in. He sat there for a long time waiting for some action. President could do nothing until his 2 counselors left. Then he explained that the Lord had revealed to him the identity of Zed, but not to his counselors. The Lord told Zed, not until thou art washed and anointed by my high priest and servant shalt thou be a prophet in these latter days, a special messenger to the tribes sitting in darkness, a sifter and refiner to the saints of latter days. All who reject these servants shall perish from off the earth. In another dream the bishop saw himself and wife sitting in the front room when an angel came with a beautiful bouquet of flowers. This angel tried to pin the flowers on the bishop, but he refused to permit it. Several times this was repeated with the same results. Then the angel said, now that is the proper attitude. Never allow anyone to praise and flatter you with the honor of men. Thine, O Lord, be the honor and the power and the glory forever. Amen. As long as he was in harmony with the Spirit of the Lord, he received direction by the Spirit of the Lord. Even as Joel said, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions, and I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, saith the Lord. Bishop Coyle was told that, if he would preach the gospel and live the gospel on the hill, Satan would not have power to shut the mine down or have power over the workers on the hill. But he will go to the people in the valley and stir up trouble and create opposition to the work. A man in Springville started the ball rolling by sending a letter to the church authorities in Salt Lake City, claiming Bishop Coyle was defrauding widows and poor people by selling them worthless stock and getting rich himself. Bishop Coyle had another dream. He saw the Mormons driven out of Mexico with only a small pack on their backs, leaving all their wealth behind. It wasn't long after that when Joseph F. Smith got up in conference and said, we have a wonderful faithful people in Mexico who are entitled to all the blessings and ordinances of the gospel. Therefore our next temple will be built in Mexico. Some of the stockholders heard this statement and rushed to Bishop Coyle with the news, to which Bishop replied, well, if what I saw comes true, they won't need a temple there. Someone told President Smith that Bishop Coyle was prophesying against him and the church. This started a wave of persecution and investigation into the works there and the life of Bishop Coyle, and the mine was closed as a result. This shutdown lasted about 6 years, during which time Press Smith died. He then appeared to Bishop Coyle and said, I was the one who closed the mine down, and it is my responsibility to see that it is opened up, and you go to work according to the purpose and mission of the mine. This was not enough to move Bishop into action. He had to be directed by the living church president. President Heber J. Grant was checking over the Spanish Fork co-op accounts and saw that the Dream Mine owed them a sum of money. He asked why don't they pay this debt? He was told that the church closed the mine and they can't get any money from the people, stockholders. He asked them if opening the mine and going to work would pay their bills. They said, yes. He then said, tell Bishop Coyle to open the mine and pay his debts, and still Bishop Coyle would not go ahead without a written statement from President Grant. This was soon given, and the mine opened and paid its debts. Carter Grant, a seminary teacher who called President Grant Uncle Heber, was closely associated and friendly. Carter was aspiring to the high calling of seminary supervisor for the whole church, but his record was in question because of his activities with Bishop Coyle in promoting the Dream Mine. He was told to sever his connections with the mine and Bishop Coyle in order to qualify or even hold his present position. Carter asked President Grant if he had asked the Lord and received any direction from him by way of a revelation, to which he replied, no, I do not trouble the Lord with such foolish things. Carter said, if you can produce a revelation from the Lord against the Dream Mine, I will go gladly along with you. As it stands now, I believe it is true and of the Lord. Carter was one of Coyle's best friends, a strength and support to him in the work. Through his influence, many people became interested and bought stock. About this time, the bishop had a dream in which he saw himself and Carter going along a road together. The church and the government kept falling trees across the road trying to block their way. Then they came to a beautiful stream of clear water. Bishop waded across, but Carter said, this is as far as I can go with you. So Coyle went along the road till he came to a side road leading to the right. He had been told to turn neither to the right nor to the left, but to keep on the straight and narrow, but he turned right and went in a semicircle which led into a building. It was a small frame building, and there was about 3 feet of ground around it. Bishop sat down by the table to do some figuring when 3 snakes came from under the floor. The largest extended its head right over to the bishop, who stuck out his finger and the snake bit it. Coyle put his finger in his mouth to suck the poison out, then rubbed it on his clothes and said, it didn't hurt much. Sometime later, the bishop called a special meeting of all the more faithful stockholders for a fasting and prayer period. The day appointed rolled around and about 30 of us met on the hill. We loaded into a truck and a few cars and went up to a green spot. He had seen in a dream that deliverance would come when he climbed up to that spot. Bishop Coyle dreamed that he and Bishop Bullock, another inspirational mining man, were climbing the mountain by way of a ravine, while the people of the church and others were throwing rocks and shooting at them until they got on top and on a green spot. Then everything was rosy and friendly, and he had wealth. At this prayer meeting, I was over anxious to exercise much faith to help the cause come forth to deliverance. But I was disappointed, for the longer we prayed, the less confidence I had. Listening to different ones praising Bishop Coyle and telling the Lord what a righteous people we were, the best people on earth, seemed to me just plain simple vanity. When the meeting was over, I said to the bishop, I guess I will have to repent and humble myself, for I just couldn't feel right and full of that good spirit which gives hope and confidence in our efforts to reach the Lord. The bishop agreed with me that I was the one out of tune. While we were in this meeting calling for help, 3 chemists in Colorado got together and received inspiration directed from the same spirit to go to Utah and sell a new process for extracting metals from ore with acid instead of fire. They had heard about the Dream Mine and decided without delay to contact the bishop. They rushed to Salt Lake City and got in touch with the Glismeyers, who brought them straight to Coyle. He was wide open for business because he had been shown that a man would come with a new process that would revolutionize the mining industry. They made a deal and went to work training Merrill Coyle and Willard Fuller in the processing of the ore. In about 2 weeks or so, they were able to produce a beautiful sample of bright orange selenium suspended in a gallon glass jug of water. Everyone was happy that success had at last come. Bishop Coyle was sold 100% and made the deal. He wrote a check for a good number of thousands of dollars and gave it to John Harper and his 2 partners. People were so thrilled and sure we were all going to get rich that they filled the treasury with money. The bishop felt so rich he wanted to pay his debts. So he and the mine secretary went to Roosevelt to pay a widow some money that they had borrowed from her to operate the mine. That night, Bishop Coyle had a dream that on their way back to Spanish Fork, they met a passenger train going east, and there was a great long snake on the train. The next day they met the train, and when they got home, Bishop tried to find John Harper, and to his great surprise, John Harper was on that train. He had cashed the check, taken the money and was gone. Merrill and Willard could not get any more selenium showings, and the whole scheme fizzled out. A big fraud. The bishop figured the stockholders would not support the work, so he decided to go into the chicken business for a livelihood. He found plenty of good gravel and put us all to work building 2 houses for Lewis Waite and Willard Fuller to live in, and about 4 chicken coops which they filled with chickens. Ivan Coons, who knew how to tend them, was put in charge. I was not so sure about the new industry as a part of the mine program. Coil was always quoting, "Obedience is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. Do what I tell you to do." Obedience to the Lord's commands and direction is required. He would say a man being made a bishop is always a bishop and is a judge over the people. I kept having dreams. At this time I had a dream that we had a granary full of wheat. It was built upon 4 stacks of lime rocks under the corners and was elevated about 18 inches above the ground. I looked under the granary and saw a small stream of wheat pouring onto the ground. I tried to see if I could plug the leak, but was unable to do so. Then a string of the neighbors' chickens came running under the bin and ate the wheat and returned to their coops. I thought, this will never do, so I stepped into the granary and saw a funnel-shaped hole where the wheat was sinking down. I had no way to stop it, so I had to let it go. Bishop Coyle dreamed that he and his wife were riding on a beautiful passenger train headed for success. The train stopped at a station in Bishop, and his wife got off to get something to eat at a lunch counter, and the train pulled out and left them. But soon a slow old gravel train came along, and they got on it and rode along for a while, and it stopped. The crew said, "This is the end of our run," so the bishop got off and was walking alone down the track. This gravel train was work on the cement houses and chicken coops we were building in order to get food, something to eat at the inn. After building the houses and the chicken coops, he insisted on building wheat bins and storing up wheat, but the company said this is the end of our run, and the gravel train stopped. While I was pushing a wheelbarrow hauling gravel for the chicken coops one day, Bishop took a wire and tied it to the front and helped pull the wheelbarrow. Then suddenly his dream came to my mind, and I said, "Bishop, this is a slow old gravel train." He dropped that wire like a hot iron and didn't come to help again. This was the first he had realized he was on the gravel train. At this time I had another dream that Howard Grant, a seminary teacher in Arizona, came rushing up in a black new car. He said, "Bishop, come and I will show you where rich gold is, right up the road in Water Canyon." So Bishop Coyle, Lewis Wright, Willard Fuller and I got in a car, and up the road we went. We were clipping along nicely about halfway up the canyon when suddenly the car stopped and started rolling backwards. I became frightened and said, "Howard, put your foot on that brake, or we will all be destroyed." He paid no heed. Then said Bishop, "Put your foot on that brake or we will all be destroyed," but he would not budge. Then I parted the front seat and slapped the brake to the floor, but there was no brake, so we plunged off, more than 1,000 feet to the bottom of the canyon, landing right side up. We all got out of the car and looked at each other. I said to Howard, "You had better get your brakes fixed." He took a brush out of a quart can and began to paint around his hat band. Lewis walked over and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Jesse, I want to thank you for saving our lives." I said, "Don't thank me. I tried but could do no good, thank the Lord." A few days later I went to spend the evening with Bishop Coyle. We sat in his kitchen, one at each end of the table, and were having a very enjoyable time talking about the wonderful manifestations he had received from the messengers and the Lord. Suddenly a loud knock came at the front door, and in popped Howard Grant, all fired up with the good news of success to come. He had visited a woman in Arizona who had lost her husband and almost lost her mind, when suddenly she became spiritual and began telling fortunes. She told Howard that he was interested in a mining proposition and described Bishop Coyle as being short, somewhat stooped-shouldered, and that he was making a cross-cut at the mine and would strike gold in September, and 6 months later he would strike it very rich. At this point I spoke up and said, "Bishop, a man holding the Melchizedek priesthood after the order of the Son of God should get his direction from the Lord. You know what happened to Saul when he went to the witch of Endor. He lost his kingdom and wives and was destroyed by death." That word made Howard angry, and he grabbed his hat, rushed out and slammed the door. Next morning when Bishop and his son Merrill came up to the mine for breakfast and prayer and to instruct the workers, he had an angry look and a harsh voice as he said, "I got some good news from Howard last night, and if old Young had kept his mouth shut, I got the rest of it." He then began laying judgments upon me and said, "How do you like that, Young?" I said, "It's all right, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you." The men chuckled a bit and we all went out of the house to go to work. From there on the bishop put me away from the others to work alone, so I couldn't talk to the other men. Then I had another dream. I saw Bishop Coyle sitting in front of the bunkhouse, and I walked over, picked up my lunch bucket and walked past him down the road. He said to me, "WHAT do you want to go that way for? That's not the way to go." I said, "Yes, this is the best way for me to go." And when I got to the turn in the road, I looked back, and Bishop was down on his hands and knees scrubbing his face in the gravel, and roaring loud with pain and anguish. I told this dream to the men, and someone told it to the bishop. He didn't like that, so he put me to work on the road alone and said, "You can scrub your face in that gravel, and see how you like it." I had a dream then, that I was standing in front of Bishop's house, and a large snake 6 inches in diameter and 15 feet long came slowly toward me from the south. The next day while I was working, Bishop came slowly up to me and asked if I was reading them Revelations from Glenn Deemings, to which I said, "Yes, I am searching for light and truth from every source I can find, for God is the author of all truth." "Well," he said, "there ain't nobody can read them Revelations and work on this hill." With that he walked away. When quitting time came, I took my lunch bucket and went to the bishop and said, "I won't be back to work tomorrow." "Why not?" he asked. I said, "You say we can't work here if we read Glenn Deeming's writings." "I intend to read everything I can find." Then he said, "You come back to work, it will be all right." The bishop said the first ore would come from on top, so he put us to work in Water Canyon, where we worked on 6 prospects, some of which showed good signs of success. The trouble is that no one has been able to tell what the bright silvery metal is. One night I dreamed that I was coming off the hill, and when I got out on the point of Knob Hill, I looked down to the cabin, and 2 wolves were hanging around the bunkhouse. So I raised my rifle and shot twice at them, and they both scampered off the hill so fast they made the dust fly. That was Bishop and his son, Merrill. They both left some time later. Bishop didn't like the idea of others having dreams about the mine, and when I told him a dream, he angrily turned to me and said, "Who's dreaming about this mine, you or me?" As well might man put forth his puny arm to stop the Missouri River in its decreed course, as to stop the Lord from pouring down revelations upon the heads of the latter-day saints. In days of old, revelations came not by the will of man, but holy men of God spake as they were moved upon by the Holy Ghost. About this same time I dreamed I was standing on the flat east of the bishop's house with my hands and chin resting on the shovel handle. I looked to the north and saw a group of men, 8 or 10, standing in a circle with their arms over each other's shoulders and their heads bowed, as if in a prayer circle. They broke the circle, and they all turned their faces toward me. Then I recognized them as the general authorities of the church who had passed to the other side. One of them walked over to me, and I felt so humble and thankful to greet President Joseph F. Smith. He had a beautiful gold watch in his hand, which he extended to me saying, "Take this watch. It is for you." I said, "I have a good gold watch, and do not need another." He said, "Your watch will not do. You must take this one." So I meekly reached out my hand and took the valuable treasure. Then he looked at my feet and said, "Brother Young, we have something very good for you, if you will clean your feet." Then I looked at my feet and saw dried clay mud on both shoes about an inch high all around both shoes. Then he asked, "Will you clean your feet?" And I said, "Yes, I will clean my feet." He looked pleased and turned and went back to the other brethren. I awoke from my sleep and pondered the meaning and began to search for the interpretation, and it was given to me that I was to bear testimony against them. A warning, then judgments would follow. The watch was to signify the office of a watchman. In a prayer meeting, Bishop called on me to pray. I acknowledged before the Lord our weaknesses and quoted from Isaiah where the Lord said, "I called but none would answer. I called again, but none would hear." So I put on vengeance and trod the winepress alone. Your iniquities have separated between you and your God, that he will not hear. This was too much for the bishop. He never would call on me to take part again, but began to persecute and slander me before the workers. One of the men said to me, "You may not be working here very long." To which I replied, "I'll be here when a lot of you are gone. They have all gone years ago and are forgotten." I got a job in Provo and didn't go back to work at the mine for a while. I had a dream in which I was walking with the bishop up in Water Canyon looking for some ore to work on. We stopped by number 6 and I picked up some ore and said, "Here is the right place to work, Bishop." He was not interested, but hastened on up the mountain and over into flat canyon. A few hundred feet down the other slope we came to a ledge and turned west. As we walked along this rim, it began to crumble and fall. I said, "Bishop, we had better get on solid footing." I stepped over onto solid ground, but he made no attempt to save himself, and the mountain opened up. A great chasm swallowed the bishop, and he went thousands of feet down into the bowels of the earth. I went to the bishop's house and announced to Lewis Wade and the family that Bishop was dead. There was much weeping among them. I dreamed again that I walked into the bishop's room, where he was sitting in his armchair. I stepped up to him and said, "Bishop, we have all got to set our homes in order before we can get results in the mine." At this he was disturbed and angry. He reached out, grabbed my tie, and with a piece of chalk wrote the figure 4 on my tie, then hesitated. Excitedly I asked, "What did you do that for? What does it mean?" He answered, "That is power of death in the canyon to you." This frightened me, and I awoke wondering who had sinned into death. This was in 1946, so I concluded that death would come in the 40s, which would be the limit of time for setting our houses in order. I went to the bishop and told him the dream. He resented this because he felt that his house was in order and that he was highly favored of the Lord. I learned later that he had written the date of his own passing, which was in the 40s. He died in 1949. Soon after this I had another dream in which I was standing on the foothills below the mine looking up the little canyon. Suddenly a large new bright red caterpillar came pushing heaps of dirt and rock, leveling the ground. No one could be seen operating it. Then I saw Bishop Coyle and his son, Merrill, standing right square in front of the huge blade, and I yelled at them to get out of the way or they would be crushed and buried up. Neither of them paid any attention to me, and the blade pushed a big pile of waste over Bishop and buried him up completely. But Merrill was between two piles of waste, and when the blade went over him, he crawled out and walked away. This huge caterpillar represents the newly appointed general authorities of the church, who were out to crush everything that was out of line with their thinking and policies. Bishop Coyle was taken before the council and asked a long list of questions about his claims for the mine, all of which he answered in the affirmative. They then asked him to sign his name to this report, to which he agreed if they would give him an opportunity to have a meeting with the presidency of the church to tell his story and mission of the mine. This they agreed to do before publishing the report. But they changed all the yes answers to no and published the report without giving him a hearing with the authorities. When Bishop saw that report, he was shocked into despair and sorrow and shouted, "It's a lie! It's a lie!" His name was signed to a document denying the divinity of the mine and making his life's work a fraud and a delusion. He was told never to sign his name to any documents, but he trusted in the arm of flesh and lost. From this shock he never recovered, but got weaker and weaker until he was finally possessed of evil spirits. It took days of fasting and praying and administering by the priesthood before he was delivered. He contracted pneumonia and died soon after. Just before he died, he called a few of his closest friends to a meeting. They kneeled in prayer, the bishop being mouth. In substance he said, "Lord, I have done all you told me to do, and I now turn the mine back into your hands." With this action a great and heavy burden was lifted from Bishop's shoulders. Isaiah 15:18, "I have seen his ways, and will heal him. I will lead him also, and restore comforts unto him, and to his mourners." His great mission was finished. He relaxed and soon passed away to the sorrow and disappointment of his close friends and followers, but to the joy and satisfaction of his enemies who supposed this would be the end of the dream mine. But to the believing, these comforting words bring joy and satisfaction. The works and the designs and the purposes of God cannot be frustrated, neither can they come to naught. For God doth not walk in crooked paths, neither doth he turn to the right hand nor to the left, neither doth he vary from that which he hath said, therefore his paths are straight, and his course is one eternal round. Remember that it is not the work of God that is frustrated, but the work of men. DNC 3:1-3. When the time for the annual stockholders meeting drew near, there was a tremendous effort put forth by a faction of stockholders to manipulate themselves into office and control of the mine. I dreamed that I drove my Model A Ford to Spanish Fork and saw Steve Wood and a woman with their heads together plotting on how to manipulate themselves into control of the mine. I stopped and looked at them, and Steve said, "We are working for president of the mine." I said, "You will never make it," and drove away. The meeting was called, and the various factions tried to take over by foul or fair means, which turned into troubled waters throwing up mire and dirt. In a board meeting, Quayle Dixon was appointed president, 2 board members resigned, others were appointed, and things smoothed out, and we went to work. Then I dreamed that I was carried in the spirit up to the saddle above the mine. I had a pick and shovel, so I started digging for values and found rich nuggets of gold, yet the rock did not look like quartz, just gray rock. The gray rock was more valuable than gold because it has life-saving substances in it. From it we get a non-acid battery fluid which produces a life-giving electric charge, and the powdered ore makes a soil conditioner that will produce the most wholesome food on earth. Healthful food. Al Sinclair revealed its value to us and bought 500 pounds of it, for which he paid $500. This deal stopped the state from closing the mine. I kept digging until I was down about 4 feet. Then I raised up and looked up the ridge and saw a man coming down from the peak through the air without touching the ground, swiftly, till he stopped. He reached his hand down, took hold of my hand, and lifted me out of the pit. He put his left arm over my shoulders and raised his right arm to the square and shouted to the valley below. This man is acceptable because he has health and consecration uppermost in mind. He vanished quickly and I got back to work in the pit and made a trench about 15 feet long. I was taking out the values and Bishop Coyle stepped in beside me. He stepped down and examined the rocks and turned to me and said, "We had better get out of here because there is apt to be a lot of bloodshed here." I followed him for a few steps and stopped. He vanished and I stood looking over the valley and to the north toward Flat Canyon. In the distance I could see objects coming toward me, and as they came closer, I saw that they were horsemen riding 4 abreast. Each man was dressed with a breechcloth and had a bow and arrow pointed straight forward. The horses were all bay in color, slick and beautiful with no bridle to guide them. As they turned down into Water Canyon, they disappeared. They walked in the air, not touching the ground, and the end of the formation I could not see. Then I understood that they were protecting this holy mountain and I need not fear. The next instant I was in the mine. I stepped up to the face of the drift and saw a shelf about 2 feet high on the face of the drift. I took a pick and began picking it down when I noticed color in the quartz and began picking out gold nuggets. And when I got a handful, I started out to find a processor. The next thing I was in the mill sitting on a platform step on the west side of the 2nd floor. Then I looked to the door, and in stepped a short plump black man with a heavy jet black head of hair combed back over his head. He sprightly stepped up to me and reached up to shake hands with me, which I did and said, "Well, if it isn't the little dark Lamanite in person," and he acknowledged that he was. He was the one that had been appearing to the foreman of the mine giving him instructions contrary to the bishop. He was of the Gadianton robber gang spoken of in the Book of Mormon. This was revealed to Bishop Coyle, and the foreman admitted it was true. Quayle put me in charge of mining and said, "Go where you will, but find the ore." So my son, J. Young, Erwin Thorne, and I went to work at the place I saw in my dream. We worked the 4th finger and began to find values. Then one day we drilled into a new formation. I saved the drillings and gave them to the assayer, Dr. Brooksby. He got a gold button so rich he would not tell us the value. The next day we went in, and there was the shelf on the face of the drift, and beyond that was a vast body of rich ore. We were so sure of success that Quayle and the board went out and bought 3,000 feet of air pipe which we put in the tunnel. We also got a compressor and jackhammer and went to work, but the values were burned and lost in the smelting process because jealousies and zeal to domineer disqualified us. I dreamed that an important meeting would be called on the hill and that I came over the ridge and down by the bunkhouse. The atmosphere was pleasant as I stood in front of the house looking down the gully at some fleecy white clouds floating up the ravine toward the east. Then within the clouds appeared a person dressed in white apparel. His countenance was most pleasant and inspiring to look upon, and with a sweet smile he floated right in front of me and vanished in the clouds, going up the mountain. A day or so after, Quayle came up and said, "We are going to have a strange man come to meet with us and get some ore that is in this mountain." Quayle asked me to come to his home in Spanish Fork at 7 and ride to the hill with him. I got there a little early and was sitting in the living room when a knock came at the door, and Annetta went and let a man in. She introduced me to him. Then I recognized him as the person I saw in the clouds. I rode with him in the car up to the hill and heard the words of inspired instruction flow from his lips, telling us how to qualify for the blessing and riches the Lord holds in reserve for a people prepared to do His will. He told of strontium-90 fallout and other poisons that will destroy the crops and pollute the air, and that we must get the soil conditioner out of the relief mine and apply the electric culture to counteract all these evils and give us wholesome food and restore health to our bodies and minds. The famine will come by destruction of the crops of the earth and drought, floods, or hail, etc. Unity and a full trust in the Lord was his constant plea. Do not say, Al says, but thus saith the Lord. If I can only qualify as a faithful servant, I will do well. Each time he comes back he says, disunity prevails, repent and serve the Lord. But the warnings were disregarded, so he came all the way from Texas, went to Coil and said, come with me. We must move the troublemakers off the hill. They went up and ordered the three Phil Husser, Freddie Bangerter, and Alfred Brooksby to gather up all their belongings and leave the hill forthwith. They did. The idea in back of all of this is I feel very thankful for the things the Lord has shown me. I have learned that obedience to instructions from the Lord is the only way to obtain favors with him and receive the blessing promised. Truth is truth. It doesn't matter whether people receive it or not. In order to receive the blessings promised by the Lord, we will have to live according to the word of the Lord, which says, Zion cannot be redeemed except it be upon the laws of the celestial kingdom. This includes plurality of wives in the law of consecration. Chapter 10. Statements to James E. Talmage. By Carter Grant. Carter Grant was a seminary teacher and principal, as well as a nephew to Heber J. Grant. His belief in the relief mine caused him considerable conflict with the general authorities of the church, but he aptly defended his beliefs. Some of his defenses of the mine were brought out in a series of 4 of his letters to Apostle James E. Talmage, dated September 7, 9, 30 and October 5, 1931. Also included in this chapter is Carter Grant's notes from my journal, dated July 14, 1934. Letter 1 September 7, 1931. When we were together last Wednesday, you spoke regarding the portal of the long straight tunnel now being drilled, saying that you picked or pointed to a place where it might, in your judgment, if begun here, cut the bottom of Coil shaft. And you wondered how near the present tunnel was from this spot on the north side of the canyon, down toward the bottom that you suggested. I was going to tell you then, but it slipped my mind. His tunnel is not in the same canyon at all where his shaft is, Water Canyon, but is northwest about 1/4 of a mile, over in another canyon one you could not see into when you were at the mine. This is why the tunnel is running 40 degrees south of east. No one expected him to go over into that canyon and begin a tunnel until Tuesday morning, January 6, 1914, when Brother Coil presented himself to the breakfast table, where 20 or 25 men were present, saying, well, I had a dream last night, seeing the exact spot where I am to start that long tunnel that I saw in my first dream, but did not see where to start it. I know now. It is over in the canyon north of us, down toward the bottom. I saw 2 bare spots on the side hill, one above the other. We are to begin on the lower one. I went around, in my dream, about 300 feet west and stood against some small trees and leaned over, looking toward this lower bare place, and I was shown that, if I would direct the workings regularly from this point, we would get everything in the long tunnel that I was shown in my dream, getting the first water at 300 feet, the place to the winds at about 1,000 feet, and slick wall, and then I was to get down on my knees and see daylight from the turning down place, the last turn towards the rich ore, some 100 feet below the tunnel. I am told that this was a great shock to the men. Indeed, it was to me, for at that time I had supposed that the long tunnel would come out on the side of Water Canyon when it was made. I then owned a couple hundred shares of stock in the mine and looked forward to a speedy realization of values relief, as Brother Coyle always puts it. Without sending anyone down through the waist-deep snow that January morning seeking the bare spots, Brother Coyle designated 3 men, telling them to get their picks, shovels, drills, and powder, and he would accompany them down to the place of beginning. With many misgivings the men followed down the gully, wallowing in the deep snow, repeating constantly that they would never find any bare spots in a snowed-in canyon, deep beneath the shadows of the ridges. The story is that every part of the dream was fulfilled exactly, and the work was begun immediately. No surveys, no measurements, nor anything. The tunnel is in an ideal place for taking out ore, should any be encountered, being but a half-mile above the canal on an easy grade for the road. When the mine was closed 5 months later, for 6 years, this tunnel was about 200 feet long. When the day for opening, in September 1920, came, it was found that all the windlasses in the upper workings were rotten, the stations all unsafe and things generally in a tumble-down condition. So instead of drilling forward in both places, the lower one was chosen, and from then until now all efforts have been upon the lower workings. Letter 2 September 9, 1931. Brother Coyle stated that he will eventually connect directly with the old shaft running to the top of the mountain, and that this shaft will be used for ventilation. The old shaft, according to what Brother Coil told Brother Grant, is about 1,400 feet is measured along the entire excavation. Brother Coil stated that in his earlier dream, or the original dream at about 1,000 feet in from the portal of the tunnel, he plainly saw a red iron formation in the top of the tunnel which he was to follow by drifting in a southerly direction until he struck a big white vein, and then he was to go down until he got his ore, which he said would be a vein about 18 feet wide and 18 feet high of a reddish-brown formation running easterly under the tunnel. He also stated that a point about 1,000 feet farther in, which would be 2,000 feet from the mouth or portal of the tunnel, he saw a white vein about an inch wide on the north side and about 18 inches wide on the south side, which if he would follow out, he would reach 5 distinct veins of very rich ore, and that he would find platinum ore in one of those veins, and that these 5 veins would contain twice as much value as he would get out of the wince located at the point 1,000 feet in from the portal. He stated that when he got his ore in these 5 veins, that a great depression of business would be on the country lasting 4 years, and that he would take his ore out in time to be a great relief to those who were interested in the company. He stated that he would get this ore put out in the side drift at about the same time at which he would reach the slick wall or his turn-down place, 3,000 feet from the mouth of the portal, which would be right under the bottom of the old shaft. He stated that in his dream he saw the side drift produce first at the 2,000-foot point in from the portal, and the winds at the 1,000-foot point come second, and that next, that is in third place, he would reach ore at the end of the tunnel by sinking down about 100 feet as described. Brother Grant states that he has inspected the mine, and he finds the formations as now revealed to be precisely those that had been described by Brother Coyle as having been seen by him in his dream. Brother Grant stated that he and 10 or 12 other college graduates, 2 of them with their doctor's degrees, had investigated this and feel sure that this man, Brother John H Coyle, has actually seen things ahead of him, either from the positive or negative spiritual power. He also stated that he and this group are now watching the procedure very carefully and are making definite check upon what Brother Coyle has said and what he is encountering in the working of the mine. Letter 3, September 30, 1931. According to my promise to you of September 9 and 10 when talking to you at your office, I am sending a few more of our observations regarding the Coil mine, or as it is sometimes called, the relief mine. I shall endeavor to be strictly truthful, basing my statements upon no preconception or prejudices one way or the other. Seemingly, those possessing the fewest facts are doing the most criticizing. Our group, however, is delaying judgment to wait for all of the facts to come in. As, however, we are college men, we are looking ahead to a day when we shall pass judgment most severely. We shall hold nothing back on either side, giving our unbiased conclusions of the whole matter. In no way, shape, or form are we carrying our investigation forward with subtle or fraudulent intent. No one can truthfully affirm that we have not found the biggest believe it or not affair in the wide world. Really, it's worth the price of 10 gallons of gas to take a ride up to the dream mine and listen to the manager, John H Coyle, predict the future. When we were there the last of August, he unhesitatingly declared that all sorts of trouble was still ahead of the mines and the stock market, saying that the time was drawing close, the days for the bread lines to begin lengthening in Salt Lake City. And he says that he told President Gardner more than a year ago that something would happen to the Republican Party, letting the Democrats take the presidency at the next election, and that things would continue to get worse until that took place. The reason I speak of elections is because of a past experience I had with Brother Coyle's predictions. In 1911, I went to Leland Ward and had a long talk with Bishop Coyle, staying with him all day. Among other things, he rehearsed to me a rather peculiar dream. Not only did he give it to me, but he also told it to several hundred others, saying that he had seen that the Democrats would win in 1912 and again in 1916. At the time of my visit I was a juryman, passing judgment on the first white slave case tried in this state. I said, I can give you something to think about. There is a bishop living near Spanish Fork who says he has had a peculiar dream, seeing an elephant, lying flat, representing the national political powers, and the party able to roll the animal over would gain power at the next election. The Republicans worked and worked, lifting it part way, but they failed. Then the Democrats took hold of it and turned it over. 4 years later the Republican Party came to nearly turning it over, and for a few minutes it seemed they were successful, but they couldn't get it over. Then the Democrats came and succeeded. This bishop declares he is sure from his vivid dream that the Democrats will take the election for the next 2 times. Well, Attorney Richard and I and hundreds of others, having heard the dream, watched the Democrats win both times. Brother Coil declared that he had not dreamed about the 1932 election, but that it came to him so strong that he believed he was right. When his dream about the elephant came true, a number of people bought stock, so I am informed, believing that his dream regarding the mine surely must be right, but the source that is the problem. Before the Saints were driven out of Mexico, Brother Coil told dozens of us that he dreamed of seeing the United States armies on the border. Although he saw but very little fighting, he saw the Saints all driven and fleeing for their lives, that the restoration seemed slow and difficult. After he had had this dream, or at least, after he told us about it, President Joseph F. Smith went to Mexico, and when he returned, he praised the faithfulness of the people greatly, suggesting that it would be a wonderful thing if they could have a temple there. Some of us criticized Bishop Coyle, telling him that his dream was from a wrong source. To this he replied, if President Smith had seen in a dream what I saw, he would know that there would not be enough saints left in Mexico to support a temple. Someone went and told President Smith what Brother Coyle had said, possibly twisting it somewhat. Since you know President Smith's very adverse attitude toward Brother Coyle and the dream mine, you know, possibly, how he took it. I am not saying from what source John H. Coyle got his information regarding his statements about Mexico. The fact that concerns us in our investigation is that he has told such things before they have happened. We shall carry out our investigation just as carefully, whether we think he is led of God or of the devil. Without question, it's one or the other. We have already arrived at that conclusion. People who say he isn't are wholly ignorant of the facts in the case. After John H. Coyle made his prediction on silver, it rose to $1.35 per ounce. Still in the face of his anxious stockholders, he continued to affirm that it would lose its value before he got his values beneath the capstone. Then too, how dare he predict that in his long tunnel he would encounter great breaks back to the west, 100 feet or so across, turning exactly opposite to the general formation, all dipping to the east. How did he know that he was to find walls that would parallel his workings, that by running between them some 2,500 feet away from the tunnel so straight that you can see the portal of the tunnel from 3,500 feet in the mountain? Of course, walls are not uncommon. But how did they chance to run 40 degrees south of east, fulfilling his prediction, causing many investigators to come through with means, keeping the men going? How did he know, so he could say most positively, we will get drinking water when we have gone in 300 feet? It will not be sufficient to run out the tunnel, however. Then when asked how far he must go to get the stream that would run out, it was suggested to him 1,500 feet. No, he said positively. And the same answer was given to 1,600 feet, 1,700, 1,800, 1,900, and 2,000. But, he declared, we will strike at about 2,100 feet, and it will come down this ditch and over the dump as I have seen it. If we don't get water before we go 2,200 feet, we won't get any ore. If one is false, the other is also. At 2,100 feet, no miner in the world would have predicted it, but hundreds can bear witness. But as to the source of his inspiration, that's another question. Our business is to examine the facts, deciding if he does really see and predict the future, then testing to see if his prophecies come true. One day in 1929, previous to the breaking of the stock market, several of us had a talk with Sister Coyle, asking her many questions. She said words about as follows: John has dreamed many remarkable things. Never have I got up in the morning and had him say, I dreamed so and so last night. It was very plain and vivid, but what that dream has come to pass. He wrote me several dreams from the mission field, dreams that he had about us here at home which proved true to the letter. One especially I remember regarding the coming of the railroad through our property, and of how it would change its course, so our property would not be ruined. This dream, mind you, came after the surveys had been made through the very center of our farm, cutting it right in half. It came true, nevertheless. At one time he wrote me about dreams he had regarding how to save himself and the elders under his charge from the mobs, and they were all true. One June morning in 1929 he got up, and turning to me in the most solemn manner, he predicted, "EM, 4 months from today Wall Street is going to crash, causing a terrible financial panic in the United States. Thousands of people on every side will be going busted. While the little banks everywhere will be going broke, the bigger ones will become crowded with money. Property holders are going to be hard hit. Sheep and cattle are going off. A terrible condition is ahead, beginning 4 months from today. He then told me he had seen it in a dream and knew it was coming as sure as the sun rose. He said also that before these trying financial days were over, that the country would enter the 4 years of distressing times that he has been shown 2 different times in dreams, seeing that he should store grain against the years of famine that are coming. He says that the mine will come out before these hard times are over, giving him plenty of means with which to buy grain and other things he expects to store. To be sure, in 1929 we looked forward, waiting to see what calamity would come in October. While at priesthood meeting on Saturday evening, October 5, I was somewhat aroused by President Ivan's statement. According to my journal it reads, "The depressing days to come will require all our individual resources as well as the resources of this church." He then warned the people to free themselves from debt, etc., and to save my soul. At that time I could not see any chance for Brother Coyle's prediction or President Ivan's coming to pass. But the financial crash is now a matter of fact that no one would think of disputing. I know this, that my ZCMI stock tumbled from $105 to $20. Even wheat went off about 3/4 its former value. Did Brother Coyle actually dream of the crash, or did he make a wild guess hitting it exactly? Letter 4 October 5, 1931. Brother Coyle greeted us very cordially, stating that he was pleased to have Dr. Pack come and look over the mine. As we began our journey into the mountain, the workings all told comprising more than a mile, Dr. Pack began explaining what he could see, while Brother Coyle, upon being questioned, related what he had seen in a dream along the way, directing him how to run his tunnels, etc. At 300 feet from the portal, Brother Coyle declared that at that spot he had seen and had predicted, before starting into the tunnel, that they would reach drinking water, and several men present bore witness to its truth. At about 1,000 feet in, a red formation was pointed out, leading about 20 feet south through a tunnel. Then it struck a white formation leading down into the mine, 265 feet. Due to foul air, however, we could not get into it. At this point Dr. Pack stated very positively that the material between the walls that was being called a vein was nothing more than ground-up matter within a great break or fault, giving no indication of ore bodies or values. The next objective, 1,000 feet farther in, was the side drift, but this was left to be examined upon our return from the face, some 3,300 feet from the portal. At 2,200 feet, Brother Coyle related how he had seen that between 2,100 and 2,200 feet, he would get a ditch full of water, the ditch he had compelled the men to dig some 2,200 feet dry, ready for the water he claimed to have seen in his dream. At this point also, several men spoke up stating that they knew Brother Coyle spoke the truth. As we passed through various paralleling walls, Dr. Pack made it plain that such walls might be found at various other places in the mountain, and that, because he chanced to hit between them as he had predicted he would, or rather claimed he had seen in a dream that he would, was of no value to the geologist in making his examination, neither was it indicative for ore bodies or veins. At this statement Brother Coyle stated that those straight walls through which his arrow-like tunnel was to pass were markers to him that he had plainly been shown while traveling through these workings, accompanied by a messenger who pointed them out very decidedly, saying that if the tunnel passed between them, Brother Coyle would know he was directing his men properly. At the end of the tunnel, where other paralleling walls were encountered as seen in my dream, as Brother Coyle puts it, and to which a number again bore testimony, Dr. Pack asked why shaft was being sunk along the slick-sided wall down the fault line, displacement or fracture. To this the promoter said, "This place right here, the paralleling walls for about 40 feet, the white on the north, the black one on the south, the open fissure running in the center of the workings, the white formation looking like calcite or spar, the walls in the bottom, forming a hog's back as I called it in my dream, then the slick wall coming up in front of the bill precisely as I saw in my dream. We shall sink here for about 20 feet. Then if all the other things show up that I have seen, we will go down through the soft formation for about 100 feet to the capstone. But we shall have to be extremely careful, for the messenger, showing me through them, declared we would have to timber if we put in heavy shots." "How far down are you now?" requested the doctor. "About 10 feet. What do you expect to find below your capstone, as you call it?" "We will be about 2 months going 4 feet, getting through the capstone. That's the way I have it. Once through the hard stone, however, we will go immediately into a white rock containing rich gold ore in a leaf-like formation. Then we will sink on this rich ore about 150 feet, drifting a little to the northeast, then the vein turns flat, running in a huge body to the southeast. You say you have seen that in your dream? Yes, sir. Are you sure this is your turn down as you call it? No, sir. Not yet. While it fills the bill thus far, I cannot say until I go about 20 feet. I shall know for sure by then. If this isn't the turn down, then I must come out of this hole, drilling on into the mountain, seeking another place exactly like this one. As far as I can see yet, it is okay. The men, even Brother Grant here, want me to sink at this place, saying that if this is not the place I have described, I will never get another. Well, at 20 feet I'll declare myself. From here down, providing it proves out, it will be easy going, for I have seen that we would put in a small round, then pick and spade most of it. Then too, I was to find low-grade values at the turning down place, running in values down to the capstone. During the 10 feet we have gone, we are getting $1 or $2 in gold and some in silver. As far as I am able to judge, said the doctor, you have nothing to show. No igneous formation. No signs of heat. In fact, I see positively everything in your disfavor. Nothing in your favor. If Providence has hidden vast quantities of rich gold ore only 100 feet below us, it surely is sealed in well, with no traces whatever showing. I want you to know I am judging this matter as a geologist. I see no reason for sinking here, expecting fabulous deposits. We then withdrew down the track about 1,000 feet toward the portal, reaching the side drift, comprising about 1,000 feet of tunnels. Following a very careful examination of what has been designated as veins, Dr. Pack pronounced them nothing but worthless breaks or faults, filled not with vein material, but with a ground-up formation, carrying from $1 to $6 in values. He again gave no hope whatever for rich deposits. Upon talking with me yesterday noon for more than an hour and from what I saw at the mine Saturday, Dr. Pack convinced me beyond a shadow of a doubt that from the geological standpoint, the mine is worthless. The material between the walls running low-grade gold, I found not to be veins as I had supposed. At least I am taking the doctor's statement. He should know. Notes from my journal July 14, 1934. Wednesday, March 4, 1931, last night brothers William A. Jones, Clyde Hood, Philip Tadge, Richard Sontag, and I went to Brother Coyle's, arriving at 8 p.m. After asking each one of us about the hard times, getting what we knew, Brother Coyle opened up, declaring that they would grow worse and worse each week, that even the church would become so hard-pressed that the cry of the needy could not be satisfied. Brother Coyle then showed us some of the big wall that had come directly across the tunnel in the face, through which he is now drilling, toward his turn down. My, but what a time they have had down in the winds! After shooting out the black wall, until about 2 feet of soft formation had come, into which one could drive the pick without any difficulty, making a good place for a fissure. Brother Coyle felt impressed that due to the fact that the 50-foot hole up above the men had refused any longer to take the water, that now was the time to have Beryl dream come true. As the water filled in, he gave orders to pull the pump, taking it up some 75 feet. Then up came the water for about 50 feet, following them. He declares that true to what he has been shown, the ore will be found in Merrill's side, then he will go down into the winds, and the fissure will be found, and drain the water away. At this point the big fish in the bottom with entrails out and heads off, all ready for the frying pan will be picked up without any difficulty. Then, since the fissure will be open, all pumping troubles will cease. Then I write, if that isn't a marvelous prediction, there never was one uttered. Think of it, I continue, more than 50 feet of water, and still rising in the bottom of a 300-foot shaft in the very heart of a waterlogged country, and still Bishop Coyle firmly declares that soon after the values are reached by his son, Merrill Coyle, that this water will begin making its getaway as he puts it, drawing off into an open crack or fissure which the Creator arranged would lie at the very spot most needed to help this work along. When the values in fissure are reached, he said, we are to drift eastward on a wedge-shaped vein. Then at 40 feet, the vein will open to 18 feet of sacking ore. Brother Coyle made many predictions last evening regarding the terrible days of sorrow immediately ahead. He has been shown that the time will soon come when he cannot buy. 10 days later my journal says, Saturday, March 14, 1931, William A. Jones, Henry Armstrong, Clyde Hood, Horace Brough, and I went to the mine. In Merrill's side they have turned off to the right, following a wide vein of material showing large quantities of iron and other minerals. The water in the winds is at a standstill, 50 feet deep, waiting for the fissure to be opened. Since Bishop Coyle has seen this fissure, I am perfectly sure that it will be opened. Now as to storing wheat. Since this subject has been upon Brother Coyle's mind for some time, he stated to us that on Friday, March 13th, while coming out of the tunnel, inspiration came to him like a voice speaking, telling him to build double cement bins on the side hill near the powder magazine, one below the other, so that he could let the grain from the first bin run down into the next, and then down into the third and fourth. These long cement tanks or bins were to begin at the upper road and stretch down the hill, so that with the gates open between the bins, grain that was dropped into the top one would easily find its way down the incline to the lowest level. Then I write, Brother Coyle was exceedingly happy over the proposition, knowing as he does that the matter had been revealed by the Lord. This has completely upset our former plans of building elevators, etc. Then too, this plan, says Bishop Coyle, will put the grain upon our property, where no one can molest it, where we can make distribution as we see fit. All eyes are to look toward us for relief. Chapter 11. The Truth About the Coil Mine. John H. Coyle. The following information was printed in a small pamphlet in early 1933, in answer to Dr. Frederick Pack, The Truth About the Coil Mine. John H. Coyle answers statement of Frederick J. Pack. For a number of years, myself and friends have been laboring persistently to secure values at the Coil Mine, or Dream Mine, situated southeast of Spanish Fork. Since statements recently have been published by Dr. Frederick J. Pack that we have no present values nor any future prospects, and have proceeded without having had any values, I am submitting the following reports. Assays made by Thomas E. Chatwin of Mammoth, Utah, August to December, inclusive, 1931, representing several hundred assays, vary from 40 cents to $6.40 per ton in gold. A chemical quantitative and qualitative analysis by H. Roman Ph.D. on December 24, 1932, gives a return of $2 per ton in gold and declares the following metals to be present: platinum, rhodium, osmium, nickel, arsenic, antimony, lead, and iron. Incidentally, on the same date stated above, December 24, 1932, Junius J. Hayes of the University of Utah faculty reported that he had assayed sample collected by himself from a coil mine and found gold to the extent of $1.70 and 80 cents per ton. These assays closely ally with one another. The following assays from various assayers in the city are still more of a definite informative nature. All samples were collected with the view of getting a fair return of the ore, then being mined in the various drifts of the Coil mine. Crisman and Nichols, September 6, 1932, returned $1.40 per ton in gold. Alonzo F. Bardwell, September 26, 1932, returned $6.89 per ton in gold. Black and Deason, April 22, 1932, returned $40.80 per ton in gold. The officials of the Coil Mining Company, always wishing to get a definite facts, have spared no efforts in getting a true results. Respecting this fact, they had a series of samples submitted to the Assay Office of the United States at Salt Lake City, Utah, which rendered the following dates and returns: September 19, 1932, $22.40 and $64 per ton in gold. October 1, 1932, $17.60 per ton in gold. October 7, 1932, 80 cents, $1.20, $2 per ton in gold. Brian E. Grant, working at the Coil Mining Company's assay office during the months of October, November, and December, made upward of 1,000 assays, showing returns of from a trace to $444 per ton in gold. A more careful analysis of these many assay slips shows several returns over $100 per ton, while the great majority of the assay slips show returns of from $2 and $3 up to $30. Such figures as $20, $16.80, $4.80, $4.40, $2.60, $12, $13.80, and $5.60 present themselves bluntly, while thumbing this large collecting of assay slips bearing the signature of Byron E. Grant. Report of John M. Bestelmeyer of June 6, 1932. On May 30, 1932, at the request of interested parties, and for certain definite reasons, and with the assistance of Mr. D. W. Jeffs, manager of the Utah Gold Company, we visited the Coil Mining Company, situated at the base of the Wasatch Range, easterly of Salem, Utah, to sample certain faces within the workings of the mine, For the purpose of definitely proving any gold values that might be obtained by direct amalgamation and to determine as nearly as possible the value, if any, in ounces of gold per ton. All samples taken were properly numbered, dated and designated as to position, with the vein, with all faces properly cleaned of loose material, grooved and channeled, at regular predetermined distances, with due regard to the width of sample taken, to gain as near as humanly possible a result of actual value, without fear or favor to anyone concerned. Sample number 139 returns values of $15.90 per ton in gold. Sample number 140, $17. Sample number 141, $44. Sample number 142, $21.60. Sample number 143, $22. Sample number 144, $5.50. Sample number 145, $15. Sample number 146, $14.80. And sample number 147, $9.10. As you know, these samples were taken to Salt Lake to be pulverized to the required mesh and on June 4 were amalgamated by Mr. Fred Thompson in our presence, afterwards sealing the gold in glass vials. I personally weighed the gold, with the results as tabulated. It might be well to state that no attempt is made here to go into locations, history, development, or exposures, topographical or geological features, other than to state that all work, past, present, and future plans, is carried on in a businesslike mine-like manner and is impressive of good judgment, vision, personality, and determination of Mr. Coyle. While the report of Dr. Frederick J. Pack states the complete absence of ore, the above report of Mr. Bestelmeyer proves ore of a commercial value to be present. Both men are competent in their respective fields. Mr. Bestelmeyer is a mining man of tried integrity and long experience, while Dr. Pack is a teacher of geology. It seems there is an inconsistency existing here that should be righted. The Coil Mining Company accepts the report of Mr. Bestelmeyer, since his report was made from a non-partisan, unbiased standpoint and free from any exterior intimidating influences. Dr. Pack, representing the state of Utah, took one set of 8 samples from the Coil Mining Company property, and from a return of these samples, draws the conclusion that the Coil mine offers no hope for the future. The Coil Mining Company wishes to take the liberty to state that such a method of procedure is entirely unfair, unscientific, and unsatisfactory to our company. Due to the fluctuating nature of the ore, varying from a few dollars one day to several $100s on another day, as proved by careful daily assays made by the company, any one sample taken on any specific day could neither condemn nor justify the mine. Supposing Dr. Pack and his party should have visited the Coil mine on a day when the company assayer surrendered returns of $444, as was done on November 9, 1932, what would have been the nature of his report? The following letter was received by Mr. John H. Coyle. Provo, Utah, September 20, 1932. Mr. John H. Coyle. Spanish Fork, Utah. Dear friend Coyle, I was very much impressed today on my brief visit to your gold mill and, especially so in the clean appearance and workmanlike manner in which your instructions are carried out. I take this means of expressing to you my desire to help you in any manner possible, for I fully realize the pressure and strain that you labor under from day to day. In retrospection I can see Uncle Jesse Knight, a man of vision, struggling with poverty to find the Humbug Mine, and later the famous Iron Blossom Channel. I see John Bestelmeyer, the pioneer of East Tintic, ridiculed as a visionary Dutchman, and I see J. Raditz and his now famous Goat Ranch striving to convince the people of Utah of the hidden wealth at their very doorstep. And now for a few opinions formed during 25 years of active mining, the first of which is that geology does not make a mine in the state of Utah. The Mercer District, the Silver Reef and the copper deposit at the Big Indian in San Juan County, as types are geological impossibilities, and yet they do occur. If the metal production of the world depended upon the ability of the geologist and mining engineer, the major part of civilization would still be wearing breech clouts, living in log huts, and getting their daily existence with bow and arrow. As a matter of fact, time, natural disintegration, erosion, and old man dig more are the principal factors surrounding every mining camp discovered up to date. The geologist is persistently put upon the defensive for the simple reason that Mother Nature writes upon the vaults of her hidden riches a message in a language unknown to those scholarly, book-reading, so-called engineers. I maintain that a prospector with a jackass for a partner will find more ore in place in a given length of time than all the geologists in Salt Lake City. For many years prior to the coming of E.J. Raditz into the East Tintic district, I had personally guided engineers, geologists, mining experts and doodlebug artists over the large outcrops in the vicinity of the Tintic Standard Mine, only to have again and again their theoretical arguments on weak mineralization, cold solutions, detrimental faulting and other poppycock stock in trade. Years later it was my luck to stand beside a reputable engineer connected with a large mining and smelting company and hear this man condemn the mine. And yet he stood with feet firmly placed on ore that later paid millions in dividends. I distinctly heard him ridicule the ore inside as worthless sulfide, filled with a few white specks. Knowing this and much more, I want to pass on this thought to you: keep up the good work and the day will surely come when your faith and hopes will be fully realized. With the best of wishes to all, I remain, sincerely, John M. Bestelmeyer. 284 East 4th North, Provo, Utah. I, John H. Coyle, hereby declare that all the above samples were taken from the Coil mine, that these statements are true, that we have had values and have them at the present time. Signed, John H. Coyle. January 27, 1933. Chapter 12. Bishop Coyle's Dream Mine Prophecies. By Lyman S. Wood. This pamphlet was published probably in the late 1960s and was dedicated to J. Golden Kimball, who was Bishop Coyle's mission president in Tennessee in about 1888. Bishop Coyle's Dream Mine Prophecies. By Lyman S. Wood. Introduction. One time Apostle Joseph Fielding Smith decided to comb the dream mine out of the Brethren's minds for all time. He wrote a 7 or 8 page paper against the dream mine to give at the following conference. The Lord gave a revelation to Coyle, saying this paper must not be given. Coyle summoned J. Golden Kimball and Kimball came at once and said, "Here I am. What can I do for you?" Coyle said, "Joseph Fielding has written a 7 or 8 page article condemning the dream mine, and he intends giving it at the following conference. The Lord does not want it given at all. You must go and stop him." 1. Golden said, "Not me, I'm a lowly 70, and he's an apostle. It would be like a lamb sticking his head in a lion's mouth." Coyle shook Kimball by the coat sleeves and said, "J. Golden, the Lord hates a coward." Kimball said, "I'll go, but I won't have any faith." Coyle said, "You go, and I'll have the faith." The following morning Kimball put his head in Smith's office and was greeted by, "What can I do for you?" Then Kimball said, "I came here to do something for you. You have written a 7 or 8 page article against the dream mine." Smith blew his top and said, "Who told you?" "I never told anyone at all." Kimball said, "The Lord revealed it to Bishop Coyle, and he does not want it given at all." This was probably about 1934. Smith tore up the paper. Dream Mine Prophecies. The truths about hundreds of dream mine prophecies made through Bishop John H. Coyle are listed hereon for your reading pleasure. About 1887, Mr. Coyle had seen in vision where there was an exceedingly rich silver mine in East Tintic. Being a religious man, he asked advice of his bishop. He was immediately told that if Brigham Young were here, he would tell him to leave it alone and pursue farming. In 1916 a man by the name of Raditz and his associates opened up the Tintic Standard Mine on this very spot. Its stock went from 1 per share to a maximum of $18 per share on the New York Stock Exchange. It has now produced over $75 million, and its interest is still very much alive and is valuable. Mr. Coyle had lost a young heifer for about 10 days. In a dream he saw this heifer in a place across the railroad tracks, and she had broken her horn, and it was sticking in her eye. Mr. Coyle went there and found her just as he had dreamed. This was probably in 1887. In 1887 he was called to go on a mission by an unseen voice. About 3 weeks later on, men from Salt Lake City were in that vicinity, saw Elder Coyle, and asked him if he would go on a mission. In due time he received his official call from Salt Lake City, and it was from Box B. While on this mission in about 1888, he saved the life of his mission president, J. Golden Kimball, through a remarkable dream. The wife of Elder Coyle and Elder Coyle had each written letters to each other, and it was to the effect that the railroad company was surveying right through the middle of their farm, which would do much damage. His wife saw the men surveying, and then Elder Coyle saw them in a dream, and their letters passed each other in transit. Elder Coyle went into the woods and prayed that the stakes might be pulled up and moved to another location so it would not do too much damage to their farm. It happened. Elder Coyle was taken through the mountain east of Salem, Utah, by Angel Maroney. This was in the spirit, and it was the latter part of August 1894. They went 3 nights straight. Elder Coyle was shown everything in blueprint form about the mine, so that he would know exactly how to open it up when the time came. On the 30th of August 1894, his neighbor was drilling a well across the street from Coyle's home in Leland, Utah. It was against all advice of many who had previously had a residence in that area. The angel asked Mr. Coyle that if they hit water there by noon tomorrow and took the drill away by 4 p.m., would he then go up on the mountain and start the mine? Elder Coyle said he would, and it happened just that way. After Elder Coyle had been turned down by his bishop, he decided to go to a higher authority, this time for advice. He went to his stake president, Jonathan Page, and told his entire story. President Page went to Apostle George Teasdale, who at that time was acting president of the church for 4 counties in the area where this mine was located. Apostle Teasdale said he would go to the Lord that night and give his answer in a few days' time. Next time he met President Page, he told him to tell Elder Coyle that the mission was from the Lord and for him to do everything he had been shown to do and to use much diligence at all times. On September 3, 1894, Coyle took a man by the name of Brockbank up on the mountain to see if they could find the exact spot where they were to start this mine. It was very hot with the sun shining. At Coyle's request, Brockbank went to a place where they saw light from heaven on a bush, and he struck his pick right into the center of this place. It was a bush. Coyle said if this is the right place, there will be a leader within 3 feet. So they started to dig in the mountainside. When they had gone 18 inches, they found this leader, informing them it was the right place. It was a similar situation comparable to the burning bush in the time of Moses many thousands of years before. Coyle and his men actually surveyed and took up 8 claims on 9/8/1894. They started work on September 17, 1894. For the first several years, they worked the mine a few months in the winter time and worked their farms about 7 or 8 months in the summertime. Coyle also put up twice as much food supplies, etc., as any other man. They all took stock in the mine later on when it was incorporated in 1909 for their work. Coyle was shown there would be 5 M's, namely mining, milling, manufacturing, merchandising, and minting. This would be in the corporation. In about 1910, an angel from heaven had Coyle and his wife go to the temple to receive their second anointings. About 1910, Coyle told the group that he would buy the dinners for the group if there was not an electric power plant on the Spanish Fork River within a given time. Coyle seemed to always be a winner. In 1911, Coyle told another group he would buy their dinners if there was not a powder plant built on the bend south of Mapleton, Utah. It so turned out that Coyle was right again. The morning of January 11, 1914, Coyle said, "You, Lars Olson, and you, William Gamel, and you, William Pierce, take your picks, shovels, powder caps and fuse, etc., and go down the ravine on the north side of Knob Hill, and you will find 2 bare spots. That's where we'll start the long tunnel which will run to the southeast for a long ways." There were 3 feet of snow on that side of the hill. Talk about doubts when he mentioned 2 bare spots. Lars Olson went much faster, and finally he found them, and he yelled to the others, "Come here. I have found them." Lars Olson told me in Salt Lake City about 1943 the 2 bare spots were 2 perpendicular cliffs that were sticking about 3 feet above the snow. In about 1908, Coyle was made the bishop of his ward in Leland, Utah. He served well until about 1913, when Apostle Francis M. Lyman attended their Sunday school, and he told all the people to bring pencils in the afternoon and they would be given a chance to vote for their new bishop. Coyle received exactly 100% of the votes. This was such a slap in Lyman's face, and in the end it was necessary for him to appoint a first counselor to be the new bishop. Coyle was by long odds the people's choice. In about 1914, Bishop Coyle was given orders to close down the mine, else he would be in danger of being excommunicated from the church. They didn't say this then, but they had said he was getting most of his money from widows and beating them out of their life savings. Finally, in 1920 it was discovered that the Spanish Fork Co-op had $1,800 coming from supplies, etc., furnished the mine. Press. Grant sent word for them to collect this money from Coyle. Coyle told the man he did not owe it, but the mine did. They were closed down. Since the ZCMI brothers owned this co-op, Press, Grant permitted them to open the mine, which they did, and soon paid off this entire debt, thus beating more widows out of their life savings. Coyle surely had their number. Coil gave great hopes to the mothers of the men that belonged to the 145th Field Artillery, a Utah outfit. Bishop had seen they would never go over the top in France. In World War I finally they began moving into the front. A news article in the Tribune said 145th had gone over the top. Fred Squires from Salt Lake went to see the bishop, and he asked him about it, showing him these headlines. The bishop paused a moment and then said, "Fred, that paper is telling a lie. Talk about revelation." When Squires was on his way home, he saw much celebration in several cities because the war was over. The Tribune came out with an extra that afternoon retracting their wrong statement of that morning. Coil was right again. In 1912, President Joseph F. Smith said the next temple would be built in northern Mexico. This was because the LDS saints in 7 small communities were prospering with cattle, sheep, lands, etc. Bishop had been shown in a dream the LDS would be driven out of Mexico into southern Arizona, and all they could bring was what they could haul in wagons or carry on their backs. Coil told his uncle Frank Woodward, who was a religious man, that he wished President Smith had not made that prophecy. It made Woodward so very angry at his nephew for taking issue against the president of the church that he went to President Smith the next morning and turned Coil in. This caused a sharp dividing line from then on. In fact, they were extremely bitter against Coil from then on. No temple in Mexico in 1968. In about 1925, the deceased President Joseph F. Smith came to Coil in vision to see that his books were always in perfect shape to avoid trouble. In about April of 1925, Coil went to Mountain City, Nevada, where he was to be foreman for the Silver Banner Mining Company, now known as the Golden Ensign Mining Company. In those days there was no road from Elko as now. It was necessary to take a bus from Wells, Nevada, a distance of about 110 miles, all on a dirt road. When they were less than 2 miles from Mountain City, the bishop yelled, "Stop!" They all got out of the bus. It was 10 p.m. and too dark to see at all, except by the headlights of the bus. Coil said, pointing to the dump of the Silver Banner mine, "Brethren, it has just come to me that this is the richest silver mine in the entire world." They returned from Mountain City the next morning, and they saw their footprints in the dust, and Coil was so right again. Inspiration? While at Mountain City for 15 months, where no LDS church was, Coil crossed the Smallowee River to look at the 15 claims the company owned on the west side of the river. He also looked over many claims to the south of these claims. He told the directors they should take up 15 or 20 claims to the south because they were very rich in copper. They told him they had too many claims now to do the assessment work on. About 9 years went by, and all at once a Mr. Frank Hunt took up all these claims, and it turned out the stock, which was $1 a share, jumped like a whirlwind, and it went to a high of $18 per share on the New York Stock Exchange. In the next 12 years the Mountain City Copper Company took out $47 million of high-grade copper. Coil was so right again for the nth time. In 1929, the latter part of June, Bishop had a dream where he saw all of Wall Street was going down, and that in time all the banks of the nation would be closed down for a short while. He went into the Bank of Spanish Fork, where his stake president was also his banker. He was named Henry Gardner. He said, "President Gardner, do you loan money on sheep and cattle?" Gardner said, "Yes, they are our bread and butter." Coil then told him that in 4 months from that very day, that Wall Street was going down. Gardner said, "Bishop Coil, I have always believed everything you have said, and I shall call on all these loans. But," he continued, "if that does not happen, it will be best that you get out of the country, because I will be plenty mad at you." He then wrote it down on a small piece of paper and filed it away. One day when Coil was passing the bank, Gardner called him in. He said, "Bishop Coil, your 4 months are up. I am pretty mad at you. What have you got to say for yourself?" Coil told him that his 4 months were not up until tomorrow. Gardner said, "No, you don't. I recorded it," and he started to look all through his desk to prove it. Coil said, "President Gardner, it is in that red book right there." Sure enough, Coil had 1 more day, and the next day Wall Street went down $55 billion. In early 1933, Press. Roosevelt declared an embargo on gold. This caused all the banks to close down for 1 week. Revelation. Coil proved it again. In 1930, Coil said the man on the donkey would be elected, and he would go in again, and again 4 times in all. Remember? In about 1920, Ben Bullock, who had been a splendid worker for the Dream Mine in times past, was sitting in Salt Lake City and early that morning he thought he saw that he should go and take up all the dream mine claims. He caught an early train to Provo and got his buggy and drove to the nearest part he could get to where he was to place his own notices on the claims so they would belong to him. This he did. Soon thereafter, Coyle found it out, and he prayed that Bullock would not be able to eat or sleep or drink until he returned those claims to Coyle. A few days went by when early one day Coyle went to Provo, and it happened he met Bullock, who said, "Bishop, I must return these claims to you because I have not been able to eat or sleep or drink. I want to return them to you." Coyle was right again. In 1944, when Mark E. Peterson was made an apostle, Bishop said, "He will be our worst enemy." It so happened just that way. The bishop saw in 1914 that his former mission president, J. Golden Kimball, would come to visit him later on, and he would buy 500 shares of stock. Kimball was a regular visitor to see the bishop about once a year. Finally, about 1932, Kimball said, "I am going to buy some stock from you today." Coyle said, "I know how many shares you will buy." Kimball could not keep up with Coyle, but he said, "I will put in $750. This bought exactly 500 shares. Coyle took him into the office where the books were, and there was a certificate made out to Kimball for 500 shares. It had been made out about 18 years before. Coyle had his very last run-in with Apostle James E. Talmage in about 1932. Talmage had given Coyle and the Dream Mine much trouble before them. A lawsuit against the Dream Mine happened in January 1933. It was instigated by Apostle James E. Talmage. The Dream Mine won the case, and after a short time that same afternoon, Apostle Talmage, who was at his desk in the temple in a wheelchair, was found dead, and the Deseret News was in his hands, open to the exact page where Talmage had been reading, giving the account of this lawsuit. About that same time another lawsuit was brought against the Dream Mine, and one of the other apostles found several dream miners who had stock in the mine. His thought was that since Dr. Talmage had run several bad news items in the Deseret News to the effect that the church condemned the Dream Mine, he was certain these men would testify against Bishop Coyle. The judge at the Capitol building in Salt Lake was trying the case, and he had several of these men come to the stand to testify of their feelings about Coyle. After about 7 or 8 of them had borne solemn testimony very strongly for Bishop Coyle, the judge said, "If we can have Bishop so-and-so come to the stand and dismiss us, we will adjourn this case in favor of the mine." Coyle said that probably in the 30s the mine would come in after the streetcar tracks were taken up in Salt Lake City. They took them up in the year 1945, as near as I remember. Coyle said in about 1930 that the president of the U.S., when the mine came in, would die in office. Could this be in 1968? In the 30s, Coyle said not long after the mine came in, that U.S. money would become totally worthless. "Since we owe for debts of our city, county, state and nation, probably $2 trillion, I ask you, could this happen in 1969? Many years ago, probably in 1930, Coyle saw millionaires in the bread lines. Suppose this could happen in 1969 or 1970. Watch and see." In the 30s, Bishop said that 2 out of every 3 would die or be killed when the judgments of God came, and this would be true all around the entire world. Could this happen in 1970? Coyle gave progress reports of things that would happen inside of the mine, and he gave probably one each month or so. This is what kept up a great amount of interest for the miners to look forward to. Coyle said in Fredonia, Arizona, at the breakfast table in the home of Dr. Brooksby, that World War II would be over and won by the Axis powers in just less than 3 years from that date. It was on the 28th of August 1942 when he made that remark. It finally turned out that Harry S. Truman proclaimed peace on the 14th day of August, 1945. This just happened to be on Coyle's 81st birthday. On Sunday, August 12, 1945, about 25 of us had been called down to the mine for a special 2-hour prayer meeting. There had been a man that had worked on about 3 or 4 of these Dream Mine claims. Try as they would, he would not leave. In fact, he would defy them to put him off. Coyle told us that he was sure we could pray him off the hill. Many or several objected and wanted to resort to law. Bishop said, "No, we will pray him off." The man that offered the first prayer, his prayer was so powerful that it almost shook the ground where we were kneeling. The second man that Bishop asked, the bishop did not know his name, but said, "The man next to Steve." This man prayed for the Lord to put into his mouth what he should say. He then prayed the encroacher would not have peace of mind and that he would voluntarily come to the bishop and make his own terms about leaving all his claims and going off the hill. In a few days, early one morning this man appeared to Coil's home and said, "Coil, you want me to leave the hill? Now here are the terms that I will leave on. You give me $500 for my 5 years' work, and I will deed everything, claims, tunnel, water and cabin all over to you. I have been too lonesome, and I feel that I will have peace if I go away." The money was paid, and it was like the second man said. In about August of what I remember as 1946, about 25 or 30 of us dream miners met the bishop near the top of Knob Hill. The bishop pointed to a spot above the roadway, which looked like a slice of land in some wet season had taken off, say a piece of land on the hillside of probably 10 feet wide and 15 or 20 feet long up and down a steep hillside. Bishop pointed to a point and said, "If we dig in there a few feet, we will find a tunnel where we first started the mine." One dream miner started to probe his bar, thinking he could open up this tunnel with the end of his bar. The bishop told him to move the point of his bar over about 15 inches to the east, which the man did, and in a moment or two he had shoved his bar into the tunnel. It surely pleased everyone, and the bishop was right again. A man was appointed to have a monument made and placed just off to the side of this place, which is there today, testifying that this tunnel was where the dream mine was first started in 1894. A truly remarkable thing to do. One time in about 1946, an attorney who was quite interested in the mine, and sometimes he attended the Thursday night meetings, said to the bishop, "How are you going to stop the government from taking about 94% of the gold away from you?" The bishop said, "Attorney, there ain't going to be no government when the mine comes in." One time in about 1940 or before, when the mine comes in, there would be a light on top of the Dream Mine Mountain. In about 1960 the telephone company placed that light up there. One time in probably the middle 30s, a stake president in Salem, Utah, had been pretty hard on the bishop when he had an opportunity to do so. He had all of his barns, stock and machinery burn up in one night, while his 10 acres of peas, which he had been given instruction to harvest in the next day or two, were laid flat on the ground by a terrific hailstorm. His neighbor's peas across the fence were not even touched. A good aim. This stake president said, "I must have done something displeasing to the Lord. Someday it is to be hoped he will repent." Bishop saw that after the mine came in, that all the churches and schools would be closed down for a while. He saw this in about 1930. One time about 1930 it was made known to the bishop that he would have a partner in the mine. It happened the state of Utah traded a section of land down in the southern part of Utah to the government for Section 16, which just happened to be 640 acres right over the richest part of the 9 rooms. This will give Utah 12.5% of all the gold taken out of that area without them working at all for it. In addition, they have been receiving $320 per year ever since then, about 37 or 38 years now. The bishop saw in about 1914 that in time the horses would be left home. The new king of carriages that people would use would have 2 eyes so they could see at nighttime. He also saw these new vehicles would get larger and larger until they would become as large as boxcars. They would travel through the country at night at a very great speed. Then it would be most unsafe to cross the street day or night. Look at those large semi-trailers, even larger than boxcars. The bishop said the mine would come in as follows: the 4th finger of the 5 fingers of the right hand drift would produce the first gold. Then the winze, which is 275 feet below the main tunnel, would produce second. This would be an 18-foot wide vein which would run 2,000 feet and come into the 9 rooms. It was described by the bishop as being a very rich vein of sand, so to speak. Very rich. Then we were permitted to go almost straight down for 100 feet, when they would strike an exceedingly hard surface which would be 3 feet thick, and it would require about 30 days to drill through it. At that time we would strike a very rich chimney of ore which would go down another 175 feet and come right into the 9 rooms. As soon as the miners drilled through this very hard 3-foot thick material, which was called the capstone, then and not until then, were we permitted to entirely equip the mine with modern machinery. All, up to that time, was entirely hand drilling. Bishops saw that this gold was so very rich that if they did not use it for what it was intended, they would have it taken away from them, and they would never find it again, regardless of how many men and machinery they used to find it. The bishop had it made known unto him, probably in 1914, I am not sure, but they would build a grain elevator which would hold 1 million bushels of grain. This would be to keep many thousands of people from starving during the time of famine. At the very same time, he saw that the 315,000 bushel grain elevator built at Welfare Square, Salt Lake City, would be entirely empty, right at the time it would be most needed. What a terrible pity. He also saw that we would buy our wheat at 50 to 60 per bushel, and that it would be bought out of the first and second years of crops in those famine years. He looked up and down the state everywhere on the third year of famine, and he could not buy a bushel of wheat for a bushel of gold. That tells me we should store food for 3 years during the famine time. Bishop saw there were 3 tunnels that went down into the 9 rooms. There would be the one at the end of the long tunnel, the one that we will use. Then there are 2 more that were built by the ancients. One of them was most of the way down the hill to the south side of Nob Hill, and men have been in many feet in our time. Then the 3rd tunnel is all the way down to the bottom of the ravine or gully, and across to the other side, and at the foot of some high cliffs is the hieroglyphic tunnel which was used by undoubtedly the Jaredites. I am not certain whether the Nephites used it or not. Bishop saw that our children and their children in generations to come would never live long enough to mine out all the gold in this mine. Also that it would have more gold than all the total amount of gold in the entire world. In 1894 it was made known to the bishop that under no circumstances would he be permitted to place brothers on the board of directors. Bishop said that right at the last, he told a miner in 1920 that a group of men would get hold of the mine and they would not be able to make the mine produce gold because of lack of inspiration, but that a great amount of credit was due them for keeping up all the assessment work for so many years. This would amount to over $10,000 of money or work for almost 20 full years. Probably around $250,000 in all. It so happened that about 550 people came to the bishop's funeral when he passed away in 1949. This was an all-time record for a place the size of Spanish Fork. The cordage was about 3.5 blocks long. I mean just the ones that went to the cemetery. One of the bishop's greatest friends was asked to dedicate the grave, etc. Among other wonderful things, he was inspired to say, Bishop Coyle will yet live on the earth, in the flesh, to complete the work the Lord called him to do. This will happen as sure as the sun shines. Almost at death, probably 1 or 2 minutes before, one of the used-to-be miners was in the hospital and witnessed this great event, namely that the bishop sat up in bed and stretched forth his arms and said, "Joseph, I will come to you." What a glorious ending to a great man. Bishop said that right after the mine came in, there would be 2 men from the east, and they would bring suitcases filled with gold and stack it on the dining room table in great stacks and offer it all to the bishop for his mine. The bishop only smiled and said, "No." Bishop said this stock would go to a high of $6,000 per share, and he saw that people would go to court for 1/2 of 1 share. A very learned man from Payson, Utah, one of the bishop's directors, talked to the bishop one day and said it would be too bad if record was never made of these great prophecies, and told the bishop that if it pleased the bishop, he would be very happy to give of his time and record them in full as the bishop gave them to him. The bishop said, "No, I am waiting for Sam Taylor of Provo." In probably the very early 20s, the bishop was on top of the hill, and they noticed extra heavy black clouds halfway down the mountain all around the entire country. It was most discouraging. The bishop told his men he wanted to be alone. So he walked part way around on the west side of Nob Hill and he knelt down and prayed to the Lord for some relief. As soon as he arose, he saw a tiny clear blue spot way out in the northwest. It went all the way into the clear blue sky. In just a few minutes, a wind came up and drove all the dark clouds completely away. Later on, when the bishop went to Mountain City, Nevada, it was made known to him that this was the tiny clear spot in the dark clouds, and it was what is now the Golden Ensign mine, and that it was to come in a short while before the Dream mine. It would be first. The bishop also said there would be a light-complexioned man from the north that would come down here right at the last, and he would bring plenty of money in his pocket, and in 1 or 2 rounds of holes they would strike the rich gold ore in the 4th finger of the 5 fingers in the right-hand drift. Bishop saw probably in the 20s they would strike platinum in the right-hand drift. The stock jumped to $10 per share. The bishop told them not to buy because this would soon blow over. But he continued, "The next time we strike ore, it will never blow over. The Dream mine will build a large bank about 200 feet or so to the northwest of the north end of the concrete retaining wall, which was built many years ago, and it is below the place where the grain bins will be built. This bank, soon after the mine comes in, will have its vaults filled with gold, And when the company loans money to poor people at from 0% to as high as 4%, according to whether they were well-to-do or poor, the banks in the land would rise up in anger and try to make the mine loan money at 8 or 10% like the banks were doing, and because the mine had all the gold in the country, the banks would be powerless to do anything. He also saw the mine would come in after a hard winter followed by a waterlogged spring, then a dry hot summer, and when the wheat was in the boot, the bishop came out of the tunnel with the first gold in his hands. One time in about 1919, it was when the bishop was still living in Idaho, he heard one evening every word that Peter C. Carlson was saying to his wife up in the avenues in Salt Lake City. He and his wife were going to catch the train that same evening for Salt Lake City. They arrived at probably around 7 a.m., and he at once called Peter C. Carlson on the phone. Peter was so nice that he drove down and took the bishop and his wife up to the Carlsons' home for breakfast. Afterwards, the bishop told Peter C. every word he had said the evening before. Peter denied it all, and finally Peter's wife said, "Peter, why don't you stop lying to the bishop? Here is a real honey, and it will save people's lives if they will heed this most wonderful advice." The bishop said, probably in the 30s, that when the mine comes in, we have a queer lot of dream miners that want to do many things. One would buy a large automobile and tour many countries in the world. Many would buy large ranches and stock them well with cattle, and Parley, here, would charter a ship and go down into Central America and hire a lot of men and uncover one of those ancient temples and bring his findings back and give them to the BYU. Well now, Bishop Coyle will tell you the most important thing for you to do. You should have your houses filled with a large amount of food and go inside and cut off your radio, TV, your telephone, and your daily papers. You will not want to know what is going on in the outside world at all. I saw that 2 out of every 3 people on the earth would lose their lives from starving or from being killed on account of the judgments of God that would be in full swing. I saw that I could walk great distances right here in Utah by stepping from one man's dead body to the other. After you get inside your houses, you will be in there for quite some time. To me, my own opinion would be we would be there for the 3rd and 4th years of famine, and probably another one, because there was such a shortage of seeds to plant that there was not an abundance until the 6th year. I have been wrong before, and the best thing to do is to pray to him for advice. The bishop said that if people could travel very far, this being the richest gold mine in the entire world anywhere, there would be many whores, gamblers, drunkards, confidence men, and what have you. All of them would be trying to make a stake for themselves. God will not permit this on his works. Bishop still lived in Idaho in about 1918, when all of a sudden he got put into the bishopric in Oakley, Idaho. While there, he made a record of having many more young men go on missions than they had ever before had. Soon though it was all to end. Dr. James E. Talmage, of the 12 Apostles, heard of this, and he went to Oakley and had the bishop removed from that office. I have been told by the bishop that the first shipment of gold would be a small piece in the paper, near the mining page, and few people would see it. It would be about 1 inch long in the paper. At the same date, and on the same paper there would be 4-inch headlines. We were never told what those headlines would be about. My speculation would be war ends, just a guess. Also, when the second shipment of gold was made, there would be a jam at the mountain, and hundreds of people would never get up there to be in the midst of it. I understood this jam would reach for several miles. One time before the 30s the bishops saw that, when they reached the place in the long tunnel for the turn down into the 9 rooms, there would be a snowstorm very much out of season, and it would go halfway down the mountain. It happened one time in June, as 2 men from Mapleton, Utah, saw early one morning. They saddled their horses and went immediately to the mine. They got the bishop and showed it to him, and they went into the tunnel. And a few days digging down at this spot proved it to be the right place. In building this modern flotation mill on the steep hillside, one of the bishop's very best carpenters said he could not build a mill without a blueprint. The bishop knew it was an expense for nothing. They finally hired a Mr. Pope from Salt Lake City, who made a survey in the field and set out to design a mill. The only thing was, each time he would come with some blueprints, the bishop had that part of the mill already finished. The Lord showed the bishop what to do. Bishop saw and told this in the early 20s. They would cut down the size of the greenbacks. You remember we used to have greenbacks about 1.5 times the size of what they are today. The miner that he told this to kept one of the $5 bills, which is redeemable in gold. I saw it recently. Also, he saw where the water would run down the streets of Salt Lake City. In the spring of about 1951 we had a real river of about 3 feet deep running west on 13th South. The streetcars went across on a bridge that was elevated at least 4 feet. Both sides of the street were sandbagged to a height of about 4 feet. I saw a man in about an 18-foot boat going west from State Street. He also said prices would go higher and higher, and all at once something happened, and in one night the props would be knocked out from under everything, and down would come everything. This condition would be brought about by strikes. It really looks like the time of this could be within the next few months' time. He also saw the man in the president's office would die in office just a while after the mine came in, and he saw them look up and down the country everywhere to try to find a man to take his place, and they would not be able to find one, and the nation wandered in chaos. That's how bad it will get. Also, he said all the mines would be closed down, and now think of it, the copper strike may be settled for a while, but at best it will be temporary. Bishop said, there will not be anything in the country anywhere that you will not have your hands in. Bishop told a miner that worked for him in 1920 that they would call in all the gold in not many years. Do you remember this happened in 1933? Bishop told a miner that worked for him in 1910 that there must be 3 things happen before the mine would amount to much. First, the church would be set in order. Second, the dream mine would come in. And third, the nation would collapse and its money become worthless. We learned through the bishop we would have 9 months to build grain bins and store food, and that would be the longest. That money would be good. In the 30s the bishop said that Russia would invade the eastern shores of Canada and the United States and get as far as the Mississippi River, and that priesthood powers from heaven would drive them out of the lands, and that Old Glory would always be safe. See Doc. And Cov. Sec. 133-58. Bishop said we would have 4 years of famine here in Utah, and there would be 7 years in the world. The 5th year here would be ever so scarce because of a shortage of seeds to plant. The 6th year the rains came, and there would be an abundance from then on. 1/3 of the people is all that would enjoy it. In 1914 the bishop was shown that Heber J. Grant would be the next president of the church, and he would fill the stakes of Zion with the rich and the learned, and together they would drive the church into the wilderness. Do you remember just what happened? Among our leaders today, we have one that lives in a penthouse on North Main, while another lives in a swanky hotel private apartment. Compare this with the Savior, who said, the foxes have holes and the birds have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lie his head. He said also, the church, the state, and the nation would be brought up a stand-in, like a wild colt to the snubbing post. Bishop told a miner in 1920 that Joseph Smith would go into their private office in the church office building, and they would say, how did you get in here? Whereon Joseph would fire every last jack one of them, and set them on 3 little stools over in the corner. Bishop begged the people to pray for the authorities, to repent from the evil practices they were doing, and if they don't change, they will go down and down and down, and they will become beggars and vagabonds and paupers. Then he continued, what are they going to do? Where are they going to go? Where are they going to hide? This is the way the bishop talked. When the mine came in, he saw men shake their fists in the authorities' faces and say, you kept me out of this. How's that for honey? Bishop was the happiest he had ever been when he saw the church accept the dream mine. Then he added, you will have to go up and down this state and preach for the people to stand behind the authorities of this church. The last time I ever heard him say that, he added, I have never told you who the authorities would be. Please Z Doc. And Cov. 119 and 35-13. Do you think this could cut any ice? The bishop said, if the men on South Temple Street would have held the priesthood, he wouldn't have been excommunicated in 1948. Last but not least, the compiler of these truths knows that at least 95% of them are correct. That is, I know the bishop made these prophecies. Inasmuch as I have received about 12 to 14 of these prophecies from men that worked for the bishop for about 9 months, 1 year, 2 years, and one man even worked and lived at the mine for several months after the bishop's death, and also lived there with the bishop for about 3 years. Now these men had no other motive in their hearts but to tell what the bishop had said in their presence. I believe them for the other 5%. But as an attorney would say, it's hearsay evidence. I must admit that I did not hear it myself. But I do believe it. It is possible for a mistake or two to creep into my own 95%, and also there could be a mistake in those 4 men who worked at the mine. I must add this gem: when the 2 messengers talked to the bishop the early morning of January 10, 1914, with the shorter one, Doing all the talking, Bishop was told he would get to tell his story to one of the presidents of this church. Under an odd set of circumstances, Bishop Coyle was made acquainted with President Ivins by Peter C. Carlson on the Hotel Utah corner. This was probably in May of 1920. President Ivins said, "Are you the head of the Dream Mine?" Bishop said he was. President Ivins said, "How's your time?" Bishop said, "My time is your time." So they went arm in arm to the church office building. It had been raining, and now the sun was shining brightly. Several of the apostles were out on the steps, and President Ivins and Bishop Coyle walked up the steps between them. They talked for nearly 1 hour. President Ivins asked, "Did you say this was going to build up Jackson County?" The bishop said the owners of the stock could consecrate it to the Lord if they desired to, and in that way it might be used for that purpose. He then asked the bishop, "Did you have any anger in your heart?" The bishop said, "No, I just felt sorry for the ones that condemned us." The bishop's answer seemed to satisfy President Ivins, and he then said to the bishop, "You go and work your mine, and if you don't, the people will render you." In about 1935, the deceased apostle James E. Talmage appeared to Coyle and said, "Please forgive me." The bishop said, "Dr. Talmage, I'll think that matter over." Talmage said, "I have run against a stone wall, and I cannot progress. Now will you forgive me?" The bishop said, "Dr. Talmage, after all you have done against the Dream Mine, I'll think that matter over." Talmage then said, "I take all the blame for turning the entire church against you and using the columns of the Deseret News to sour the entire church against you. Now will you forgive me?" Then the bishop said, "Dr. Talmage, with that understanding, I now forgive you." Dr. Talmage gracefully bowed and the vision was closed. Bishop said, "Ancient sacred relics would be found in the mine when we get to the place where the Nephites used to work when they were living righteously. To ever find them, one would need to have the Spirit of the Lord, and under no other condition could anyone ever find them." Coyle said that right at the last there would be a man come along with a new process that would entirely revolutionize the entire mining industry. Coyle said after the mine came in, many were sitting around and giving praise to God for this happy Christmas. Also that about 25 were wanting to put roses on Sister Coyle and generally making fools of themselves. Also he said, "We will have a mild open winter after the mine comes in, which will permit us to pour concrete all winter long to build the grain bins to hold 1,000,000 bushels of wheat." And finally, I received this beautiful poem from an unbeliever down south on Leland soil. There lived a man by the name of Coyle, who had a dream, so I've been told, about a mine all rich in gold. This gold is not for tax and bounty, but for the building up of Jackson County. Bishop Coyle, next to the prophet Joseph Smith, had more visits with messengers, including an ancient prophet and a latter-day prophet, than any other of our day. He had a mission in this one way only, which compared to that of the Savior. He was persecuted by those who should have loved him. About 1930 Bishop saw the following strange revelation. Coyle had to go through a forest, and in the middle of it there was a table with 3 rattlesnakes lying on the table. Coyle sized it up in his vision and thought he could get by them safely. The smallest rattlesnake struck a blow at him and missed him. Then the snake crawled off the table and down under the floor and died. That was, Coyle said, a small geologist in Salt Lake City. The middle-sized snake struck at Coyle several times, and finally it crawled off the table and down under the floor and died. That was a large geologist from Salt Lake City, Utah. Coyle finally thought he may, by being extra careful, be able to get by the very large rattlesnake. It struck at Coyle many times, but each time Coyle was extra careful. Finally this largest snake crawled off the table and down under the floor and died. This was a great big churchman from Salt Lake City, Utah. In a great vision, Bishop was visited by the prophet Joseph, who said, "Bishop, come with me." They met an apostle, and Joseph dismissed him. We went again and met another apostle, and Joseph dismissed him. They went again and met the third apostle, and Joseph dismissed him. The bishop said, "Joseph, are you going to do this to all of them?" Joseph said, "Yes, every last jack one of them. They have had their chance, and they have failed." P.S. The top paragraph on page 12, pages 202 to 203 of this publication, which refers to the storing of all kinds of foods, such as wheat, etc. This happens when the second shipment of ore is made at the Dream Mine. These prophecies were furnished by about 5 or 6 men who worked at the Dream Mine and who heard Bishop Coyle make them. I would say that at least 80% of them were furnished by Lyman S. Wood. 2074 East 9 South. Salt Lake City, Utah 84108. Phone 363-9444. 50 each while they last. Chapter 13. Conclusion. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Matt. 24:21. Wealth and riches can be either a great blessing or a great cursing to mankind. In spite of an abundance of wealth in nearly every nation today, most of the inhabitants of the earth are poor. Generally speaking, the rich are selfish, and the poor are envious of it. In either case, they are covetous of riches. One of the problems with money, as Joseph Smith indicated, is the big fish eating up all the little fish. DHZ 633. Our generation is not much different from the Nephites, Jaredites, Egyptians, Romans, and all other nations that have become wealthy. Riches may come quickly, but they may also disappear just as fast. Solomon understood this when he said, "For riches certainly make themselves wings, they fly away as an eagle toward heaven." Prov. 23:5. It is not always luck or chance, knowledge or experience, that provides or removes wealth. Moses said, "Thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth." Deut. 8:18. Riches have a tendency to turn a man's mind and heart away from God. Like Jeshurun, who waxed fat and then he forsook God which made him, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. Deut. 32:15. Of what value is his wealth, or of what value is anyone's wealth, if they lose sight of the giver? In their search for riches, people should be aware that they are seeking for something that could be a curse to them instead of a blessing. Brigham Young warned, "How happy is such a person who cherishes no malice or anger, when compared with the man who is constantly laboring to amass golden property, making this his only end and aim. How the devil will play with a man who so worships gain." JD 10:174. Most of the rich seldom think about God, so he often allows chaos, poverty, and misery to bring them back to their senses. If the world worships wealth, then they must pay the price. God has decreed that they will suffer the same consequences as the nations did at the time of Noah, for as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Matt. 24:37. All the prophets have looked to our time and have seen terrible judgments come upon the nations, such as famine, plagues, revolutions, destructions, and war. They have said that it would be so bad that very few would escape. Bishop Coyle also described the coming catastrophes and saw that, if this people did not have relief, very few of them would survive. He perhaps made hundreds of predictions, and all of them have or will come to pass according to his words, and not necessarily according to the way some have interpreted them. Why should this little farmer in Salem, Utah, be given the ability to make so many accurate predictions? Was it to convince people that the story of the mine is true? Was it to convince people that the end of the world is near and to prepare for it? If his greatest prophecy pertaining to that mountain of gold were to come true, what would it mean to you? Whether true or false, each of us should make a decision as to its origin and purpose. If the warnings of both ancient and more recent prophets come to pass in our generation, what do we have for protection and safety? If the prophesied mission of the relief mine becomes a reality, what will those people say who have scoffed and ridiculed the bishop for his dreams? Only time will tell. Appendices. 1. Patriarchal Blessing of John H. Coyle. 2. N. Valentine's newspaper column. 3. Les Goat's newspaper column. 4. Article on 1983 flood prophecy. 5. John Jordan's list of prophecies. 6. Statements by early church leaders. 7. Statements by later church leaders. 8. Deseret News excommunication notice. 9. Funeral announcement. 10. Salem prophecy, Doc. and Cov. Section 111. 11. Photographs of Bishop Coyle and the relief mine. Appendix 1. Patriarchal Blessing of John H. Coyle. Leland, Utah County, Utah. July 15, 1899. A blessing by Patriarch Chaz. D. Evans upon the head of John Hiram Coyle, son of John Hiram and Edlinda Coyle, born Spanish Fork, Utah County, 14 August, 1864. Brother John Hiram, by virtue of my office as a patriarch, I lay my hands upon thy head and pronounce and seal upon thee a patriarchal blessing as the Lord directs. Thou art of royal birth through the blood of Ephraim, thus art thou an heir to the blessings of the covenant, and the blood of thy royal lineage shall continue, for thy heirs shall possess the earth and the fullness thereof. Every blessing of eternal covenant shall be sealed upon thee, and thou shalt be as a mighty tree whose roots are deeply grounded in the earth, for thou shalt be unmoved in thy faith, fearless of the enemies of truth, and no weapon shall prevail against thee. By thy faith thou shalt have power over the elements, and by care of thy body thou shalt see Zion in her glory and aid in the building up of the center stake, for thou shalt be among the chosen, and see the Lord's great temple, when the pillar of fire is upon it. The Lord will honor thee, and transmit thy name to thy generations. Thy example shall be as a shining flame to light others in the path of truth. Thou shalt never want for food, nor raiment, nor for habitation. Thy name shall be recorded with the great, and thou shalt be a judge in Israel and draw the line in equity between thy brother. I seal upon thee the attribute of wisdom, thy words will be seasoned therewith, and thy judgment sound. In the day of trial, thou shalt be delivered, and every step in thy course shall lead thee nearer unto the Lord. For thou art one of the elect, and the Lord shall hem thee in by his power, and give thee control over the elements and the powers to seal up unto life and death. Thy genealogy will be revealed, and thou shalt labor in holy temples, to perfect the work of thy dead. Thy latter days shall be glorious, and thou shalt stand to receive thy inheritance, and be a great high priest in thy closing years. Devils will be subject unto thee, and sickness depart by thy anointing. And I seal thee up unto the blessings of thrones and dominions of all heights and depths, in the name of Jesus Christ, Amen. Appendix 2. To the Deseret News, Wednesday, August 29, 1973. Dan Valentine's Nothing Serious. Prophet. A Utah mining tycoon now deceased predicted inflation and the devaluation of the American dollar years ago. His name was John H. Coyle. He owned and operated the famous Dream Mine near Salem, Utah. When John Coyle wasn't mining, he was looking into the future. He was pretty good at it, too. He predicted the 1929 stock market crash almost to the day. And he predicted inflation and the fall of the US dollar. He said the big financial upset would take place around presidential election time. He said that a US president would die, and immediately the US dollar would plunge and become worth about 20 cents. He said the nation would return to solid gold coinage and do away with paper money. And he said there would be great inflation in the land, predicting that food would be so scarce it would take a bushel of gold to buy a bushel of wheat. Amid the economic chaos, Coyle predicted that the U.S. government would fall apart. Both the Republican and Democratic parties would disintegrate, and there wouldn't be one man in the entire nation strong enough to hold the nation together. Actually, he said, there would be no government at all. And he also predicted that foreign countries would take advantage of the situation. Coyle predicted that Russia would eventually invade the United States, and the Red Armies would get as far as the Missouri River where the Yanks would stop them cold. At the same time, he predicted that China would invade the West Coast but they wouldn't get past the Sierra Nevada mountains. Looking ahead, Coyle predicted a lot of civil strife in the United States, class against class, race against race. And he said Russia would conquer all of Europe and most of Asia. And there would be a great world war in the Mideast over Palestine. Remember, these predictions were made by John Coyle years and years ago. He died an old man in 1949. But don't get the idea that Coyle was a complete pessimist. He predicted a lot of dire happenings in the future of the United States. But he held out a lot of hope too. He said after the government collapsed, and after the invading Russians and Chinese were defeated, the United States would rally as a nation and become greater than ever. He predicted that many new large cities would grow in the West, and that the people would love each other and get along together, and there wouldn't be any rich class or any poor class, just happy people working together and living together happily and in peace. But before this all happens, Coyle said there was going to be a great famine in the United States. And many people would starve to death. Well, let's hope John Coyle was wrong in his predictions. After all, he didn't say a single word about Watergate. Appendix 3. Sport banks on aught relief. End of war by September 1 would boom athletics. It may be that our good friend Lyman S. Steve Wood holds the secret of the immediate future of sports. He bet me the dinners for our families that the war with the Japs would be over by September 1. It was my idea to fix the date Jan. 1, but tub-hearted Lyman tossed in 4 months just by way of exuding a little extra confidence. This is a fair wager for me, even if I lose. Now that Mr. Wood has released the tension and suspense in NVJ Day, the sports writers can go ahead and break the news announcing the suspension of travel restrictions. They can now tell what will happen about the World Series, how football teams will travel from 400 to 500 miles, and shed some light on the new American League basketball clubs and how they will be able to make the circuit. It's as easy as that. Steve may be right. Nobody can tell when the Japs will quit or how long it will take to make them give up. If Mr. Wood wins his wager, the business will have to be done within the next 5 weeks. Our friend Steve is an eternal optimist, and therefore maybe he didn't stop to consider that Japan still holds a good part of China, all of Manchukuo, Singapore, a vast hunk of New Guinea, and all of her home islands, that is, what's left of them after our recent bombing parties. In the event that forecaster Wood loses his wager, the World Series will be in doubt except as a serviceman's feature in Manila. The football teams will have to travel in day coaches, a turn that will be of no great help to visiting clubs that come from long distances. It will still be our main task to get vast quantities of materials and immense manpower over our western travelways on the way to the Pacific. Servicemen must have all the accommodations. But all this confusion, jamming of the travel lines, battling to get places and riding the hard seats, is soon to be over with. Everything is going to be sweetness and light for traveling football, baseball, and basketball teams. Shortly after September 1. Steve Wood says so. Appendix 4. The Deseret News, Monday, June 13, 1983. The Public Forum. Tribune Reader Opinions. Prophecy. Utah has seemingly been protected by being the only state that never had a national disaster. So far this year, Governor Scott M. Matheson has declared 10 counties in Utah as disaster areas. These damages, totaling over $75 million, may yet go much higher. But these calamities were foreseen and described by the controversial Bishop John H. Coyle of the famous Dream Mine. 34 years after his death, Coyle's prophecies are still being fulfilled. The following statement was published in a book by the late Norman Pierce, called The Dream Mine Story. It looks like it won't be long now before we'll be having some of the big troubles we've been expecting. I saw in a dream the other night that muddy water would flow in the streets like rivers in almost every community from one end of the state to the other. When it comes, it's going to cause a lot of trouble for a lot of people around here. It will be the beginning of really big troubles. Since these disastrous events have been a part of prophecy, it may be wise for everyone to consider the reasons why. Ogden Kraut. Appendix 5. During the summer of 1985, John Jordan published in pamphlet form an extensive list of 102 of Bishop Coyle's prophecies, as he and others understood them to be. To save space here, some of these items have been slightly condensed, omitting Jordan's personal interpretations and comments. Bishop Coyle's prophecies of the last days, as recalled by others and compiled by John Jordan. 1. The overall purpose of the mine was too big for the people to understand. But towards the end they would begin to understand. 2. The church would have a garment mill. 3. Houses would be low and would look like chicken coops. 4. What looked like sheep camps would be at almost every home. 5. Trucks looking like boxcars would be running up and down the roads. 6. The church would build a 34-story office building in the heart of New York City. The building would not have totally paid for itself before the troubles occur and the mine comes in. 7. The United States would commence selling wheat to its greatest enemy. 8. The Republican elephant would be in power. At an election, it would sink to its knees, never to rise again. 9. Weather pattern changes would be seen to the far southwest. Drought would proceed northward year by year, increasing in intensity until reaching the valleys of Utah. At that time the troubles were to start in the valleys. The drought would then head east, increasing in intensity. 10. Gold would be legal in trade. 11. A mine takeover attempt would occur internal to the leadership. 12. Before the mine comes in, all books and records must be in order. The bishop warned that no brothers or relatives should serve on the board at the same time. 13. On his deathbed, the bishop called in John H. Coyle, 3, and said, "I don't know what they will have done with the money. I just don't know what they have done with the money." 14. Before the mine comes in, 2 board members, or leaders, will leave the work. And the rest will not be of much use to it. 15. Towards the end a group will try to bring in the mine early, but will not succeed. It is best not to attempt to bring the mine in early, because if it is done, the government will tax it away, or take it over for its important strategic values. 16. Great value would not come from old Spanish workings. Those workings would be used as a flux. 17. A group trying to bring the mine in towards the end would not have the spirit of discernment to know what to do. 18. Utah copper will close towards the end. 19. Towards the end, Satan will try to stir up trouble for the mine in the valleys, but will not succeed. Then, he will come up on the mountain and try to stir up trouble with the people there and those in the valleys. 20. Dark clouds will hang over the mine and the valleys. People will be distrustful and will not talk to one another. Finally, when the clouds part and the sun shines, everyone will be happy and will converse with each other. 21. There will be a sifting of those worthy of the work. 22. Just before the end time, the mine will experience a short shutdown. 23. A gravel train operation will come to a halt incidental to the short shutdown. 24. Something will cause the church welfare program to be inadequate at the end. 25. Stock will sell for 10 cents per share. 26. At the end things will happen so fast that a person will not be able to tell what is to occur first. 27. Finally, what few old stockholders are left will have to band together to reclaim the mine. 28. The financial condition of the mine will be so bad at the end that a white-haired man from the north will have to come to furnish the money needed to outfit the processing of black ore. 29. It will be possible after all stock is sold for a person contributing to the work of bringing the mine in to eventually get 2,500 shares of stock apiece. 30. The mine will not come in until 11 families can live in perfect unity and harmony. 31. The mine will not come in until 30 people meet fasting and praying for deliverance at the green spot. 32. But, when at first the mine comes in, things will have been so difficult and desperate with so much trouble between people that stockholders will wonder if it was all worth it. 33. The US government will keep propping up the economy as if it were on stilts until finally it would suddenly collapse overnight. 34. Taxes will become oppressive and almost impossible to pay. 35. The mining industry will attempt to again become operational. But, before they get going, and the mines can do any good for the economy, the crash will come. 36. There will be a setting in order, first the mine, then the church, then the state, then the nation. They will be brought up short like a wild colt at the snubbing post. 37. The church is to be set in order just after an April conference. 38. The United States will experience increasing interest rates which will finally reach 20% to 24% after a period of 10% to 14%. 39. Banks will commence taking over mortgage defaults until they own many properties, helping to add to depression. There will be plenty of money in the banks, but none to lend out. 40. There will be an overnight price crash. Wages and prices will be 20 cents on the dollar. 41. Depression will occur just before drought. 42. Depression will become so bad in the United States that service boys will be called home to keep money in the country. 43. Greenbacks will blow down the streets and will not be picked up because they will be worthless. 44. After the economic collapse, goods can be purchased for very little if a person has hard cash. 45. Gold will sell for over $100 per ounce. 46. The church will renew persecution towards the mine. However, the mine will increase in strength and unity, whereas the unity and strength of the church will decrease. 47. Troubles in the valleys for the church will commence following the passing of the 12th president of the church, Press. Kimball. 48. Near the time of the end, many of the general authorities will become quite old. Troubles will start when 3 leaders will die in close proximity to one another. The new replacements will not be able to hold the church together. 49. In the end there will be a great apostasy in the church. A rift in leadership will cause many members to leave. Something will happen to make members congregate in and around the churches and at various other locations to discuss and ponder the great disturbing changes occurring. This will mark the commencement of the time of problems for the church, as well as the time of apostasy. 50. The bishop told of an interview with the prophet Joseph in Salt Lake City. The two of them were seeking out the latter general authorities. The bishop asked Joseph what he was going to do. Joseph's answer was, "I'm going to release them, every last man jack one of them." A man jack is a mule that must be castrated or cut off to remove their unreconcilable stubbornness to godly direction. Joseph then stated, they had their chance and failed. 51. At the end the church will be happy to turn the welfare program operation over to the mine to stop recriminations against the leadership of the church. 52. The church will be in such a destitute financial condition that it will be happy to accept tithing from the stockholders when the mine comes in. 53. If the stockholders do not pay tithing on their dividends, rains would come causing a landslide that would seal the mine from them. 54. The Provo steel plant will close at the time of trouble. 55. The railroad rails will be rusty when the mine comes in. 56. There will be little or no electricity. Lanterns will be back in use. 57. Streetcars and buses will no longer be running in Salt Lake City. 58. When the drought comes, one will notice dry, hot winds when the winter wheat is in the milk stage of kernel development. The first year of drought will reduce the winter wheat crop by 25%. The second year the wheat crop will be reduced by 50%. The third year the wheat crop will be reduced by 75% and will not be fit for anything but cattle feed. The mine must purchase its wheat from the second year's crop, i.e., within the year following the second year harvest and before the third year harvest. 59. Mud will flow down the streets of Spanish Fork, indicating the wickedness of the people. When groups of people start rifling the grocery stores of Spanish Fork, those stockholders living there should get out immediately and leave for the mine. Some were advised to come hiding from bush to bush along the canal bank. Others elsewhere were to come the long way across the mountains to avoid pillage. 60. There should be enough unity and harmony to bring the mine in the second year of drought, if not, by the third year of drought. If there is not enough unity and harmony to bring it in by the third year of drought, the work will be taken away from the stockholders. Pray that the mine will come in the second year. Otherwise, there will be extreme suffering that winter. 61. Stockholders will be tested on the low values first. 62. The rich will grow richer and the poor poorer, until many will be blue in the face with hunger when the mine comes in. 63. There will be very little gasoline. Stockholders were advised to keep their tanks filled. 64. Towards the end, stockholders will be questioned as to their part in the mine and as to what they heard was said and had seen concerning its coming in. 65. The mine will come in following an unusually hard winter. There will be heavy snows and a late wet spring. After 2 weeks of planting time, heavy rains will pelt the seed out of the ground. Then, hot dry winds will start to dry everything up, including the remaining plants. 66. At a stockholders' meeting at the mine, 2 general authorities with the police will try to lay hands on the speaker as an imposter. The general authorities will be struck dead. Stockholders rushing to their aid will be told, "Halt. Let the dead take care of the dead." 67. The first ore will be black and will come off the top beyond number 1 and at a grassroots level. If it is winter, it will be brought down by bobsled. 68. The news of the first shipment of ore will go unnoticed, since coincidental with it will be the death of the president in office. 69. The stockholders will know by looking that the mine is being brought in properly when they see the mill dump turning black. 70. Taxes will be impossibly oppressive. But the government will collapse following the mine coming in, but before the next tax collection time. Tax is not to be taken out of the Lord's values. 71. The first dividends will be paid just before Christmas, just in time for stockholders to have a little something. It will be the 4th year of depression. 72. Foolish stockholders will buy recreational vehicles with dividend money. Wise stockholders will replace food storage before there is no more food to be had. 73. At the end, the church leaders will sit back and see what happens as the mine comes in and will not cause further trouble for stockholders. A large snake will come to the mine from the south. 74. Stockholders are not to hold grudges against those who have caused them trouble. Because, when the stockholders see what happens to the persecutors, the stockholders will pray day and night for their deliverance. 75. There will be a harsh winter at the end of which the maple or oak leaves will open like a mouse's ear. 76. The harsh winter will be followed by a mild open winter. 77. A stone wall will be built along the mine side of the canal during the mild winter. 78. The mine will become a city of refuge against roving bands. 79. Roving bands and marauders will not be a problem south of the Highline Canal. 80. The second shipment of ore, that from number 4 finger, will be noticed when it gets into the news. People will come to the mine waving money, but there will be no stock to be sold. However, the mine will offer to feed the people. 81. Economic conditions will be so bad that people will say that the mine has come into production too late to do any good. However, that will not be the case, since work will commence in numerous areas of the mine at the same time following the second batch of ore. 82. The mine will come in when the federal government is in disarray. Some say that the mine will come in the late summer or fall. 83. When the mine comes in, there will be only 3 months to obtain needed goods from the East Coast and 3 more months to obtain goods from Denver, 6 months total. After that, trucks will not be running. 84. Foreign problems will commence. 85. The leaders of the nation will be blown out of office as if by a whirlwind. They will hide fearing for their lives. 86. When the mine comes in, mine personnel will be able to have most any church position which they desire. Church authorities will seek after the companionship of mind people to attend conferences with them so that the authorities will be listened to and not rejected. 87. There will be great bitterness towards the general authorities. The leaders will have to take to the pulpits to keep people from leaving the church. 88. The bishop's grandson, Lin, is to be president when the mine comes in. 89. When the mine comes in, the mountains will be covered with people looking for gold. You'll hardly be able to see the mountain for the people covering it. 90. It will be almost too late to get the grain when it is obtained. 91. The mine will also support stocking grain in Idaho. 92. A stair-step concrete grain bin will be built on the terraces provided to store wheat. Hardly will one section be completed that it will be filled while the next section is being built. 93. The wheat to fill the bins will be bought by the mine at about 50 cents per bushel. 94. There will be a large influx of people. Tents will cover the valley. People will feel fortunate if they have a chicken coop to sleep in. 95. A white city will be built in the shape of a horseshoe around the depression. 96. Travel will be unsafe in the valley north of the mine. 97. An earthquake will open and drain the winds. 98. It will be important to purchase the coinage mint machinery being sold as surplus by the Denver Mint at the end. The machinery must be brought to the mine within 6 months of the mine coming in. The machinery is to be set up at the mouth of Flat Canyon. 99. A clothing mill will also be established at the mouth of Flat Canyon, at the end of the Upper Prune Orchard Road. 100. The mine will purchase and reopen the Provo Steel Plant. 101. The local militia will attempt to gain control of the mine and its people. Mine money must be used for the right purposes, or it will be taken away. 102. Some crops will again be grown the 6th year of the 7-year drought. Appendix 6. Statements by early church leaders. Orson Pratt. Perhaps the Lord will open up mines containing gold and silver, or in some other way as seemeth to him best. Wealth will be poured into the laps of the latter-day saints, till they will scarcely know what to do with it. I will here again prophesy on the strength of former revelation that there are no people on the face of the whole globe, not even excepting London, Paris, New York, or any of the great mercantile cities of the globe. There are no people now upon the face of the earth so rich as the latter-day saints will be in a few years to come, having their millions. Therefore they will purchase the land, build up cities, towns and villages, build a great capital city, at headquarters, in Jackson County, Missouri. JD 21-136. Wilford Woodruff. No doubt there is plenty of gold hid up in the recesses of those grand old mountains that surround the saints as a bulwark, but we hope it will remain sleeping in its quiet resting places and never peep forth to gaze upon the face of day until the saints have so developed themselves that its coming forth will be no bar to their progress, but that the gold of this world may be a servant unto them and be used for those purposes for which the Lord designated it. When time comes that gold is necessary for the further extension of the kingdom, the Lord who has guided them hitherto will show them when and how to attain it. The saints of God will by and by possess all the gold that they can wisely use. It will give them much power among the wicked and great influence among nations, but they will not worship it, nor set their hearts upon it. Their public buildings will glitter with the precious metal, it will ornament their mansions and shine upon their tables, but its crowning beauty will be seen in the great temple of our God, where, in rich abundance and excellent workmanship, it will be displayed to beautify this sanctuary and make the place of his feet glorious. Mill. Star 29-619. Charles W. Penrose. God expects us to be a different kind of people from those in the world. He does not expect us to be of the world, worldly. We have come here to be separate from the world, that we may purge ourselves from the spirit of Babylon. We must have different motives from the world, we must not have the same desires as the Gentiles, for their hearts are set upon the things of this life. They worship the wealth of the world. I hope to see the time when every latter-day saint will have plenty, and the time will come when God will give unto his people all the wealth they desire, but that will be when they know how to use it aright. And when their hearts are right, and set upon the law of the Lord, and upon the counsel of his will, and when they will be willing to use it for his glory, and the blessing of their race. JD 2152. Lorenzo Snow, quoted by Brigham Young. Brother Lorenzo Snow says that the Lord will bless my brethren and sisters. He says that all the mules in the territory cannot haul away the gold that is concealed in these mountains. JD 1034-35. Brigham Young. When it is necessary that we should possess gold in great abundance, the Lord will show it to us in vision, and we shall not have to prospect and dig to find it, as the wicked have to do. The liberty of the saints is to possess power with God to open gold mines when we want gold. JD 10:288. The gold and the silver will be given to the saints, the riches of the world will be put in their possession, and they will be legal heirs. We are now passing through a day of trial to determine whether we will prove worthy of all we may enjoy and possess, for it must be enjoyed and possessed without the spirit of covetousness. The fullness of the heavens and the earth, the mountains, the gold, and the precious things in them will all be devoted to those who are devoted to their God and their religion. JD 882. Some of the brethren think the saints ought not to be rich, and they have their various feelings. A great many brethren who have been in the States do not want to build fine houses or make many improvements here, for they are going back to their inheritances. You know, there is a certain class who are fearful of getting the good things of this life, saying, "The Lord has chosen the poor in wealth and rich in faith," etc. My feelings led out to obtain every good thing we can obtain as a people, the gold, the silver, the flocks and herds, and to building beautiful cities, to having good gardens, orchards, and vineyards, and to making the earth like the Garden of Eden. To gather all we can, honestly or dishonestly. No, but through laboring faithfully and honestly, and treasuring up these things and thanking the Lord for them. And if we have substance given us from the Lord, it should be devoted to building up His kingdom upon the earth. JD 10:331-32. Appendix 7. Statements by later church leaders. First Presidency, Joseph F. Smith, Anthony H. Lund, Charles W. Penrose, 1913. The following note accompanied the reproduction of the warning voice in the August 16, 1913, issue of the Deseret News. Seemingly from this editorial note, the warning was directed particularly at dream mines and their operators. Note, owing to the importance of the subject treated on in the letter of the First Presidency to the officers and members of the Church, which first appeared in the Deseret News of August 2, this year, it is reproduced today at the head of these columns. We trust the saints generally will profit by the advice given. And in order to bring it to the attention of all church members, it might be well to cause the letter to be read in ward meetings, or stake conferences or other similar gatherings of the people. The First Presidency warned the saints against investing in worthless mining schemes or valueless stock, even if the promoters allege that they are guided by dreams and revelations. It is a timely warning. Almost everyone has heard stories of how such and such found a rich mine by following directions given in a dream, and many fondly hope for similar luck, but in most instances it will be found, on investigation, that such stories have little or no foundation in fact. They belong to the class of rumors which, like the wind, bloweth where it listeth, and thou hearest the sound thereof, but canst not tell whence it cometh, and whither it goeth. No one should be guided by such rumors, but by reason enlightened by the Holy Spirit. It is a safe rule not to accept the counsel of anyone who is in any way antagonistic to those who have been duly appointed to lead and guide Israel. And it will be found that the promoters of dream mines and vision enterprises generally are of that class. They find fault and pass judgment without justification. But by that very fact they warn the saints to steer clear of them, just as the ringing or whistling buoys during foggy weather call the attention to mariners to the presence of danger by the noise they make. A warning voice. To the officers and members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, from the days of Hiram Page, Doc and Cov. Sec. 28. At different periods there have been manifestations from delusive spirits to members of the Church. Sometimes these have come to men and women who, because of transgression, became easy prey to the arch-deceiver. At other times people who pride themselves on their strict observance of the rules and ordinances and ceremonies of the Church are led astray by false spirits, who exercise an influence so imitative of that which proceeds from a divine source that even these persons, who think they are the very elect, find it difficult to discern the essential difference. Satan himself has transformed himself to be apparently an angel of light. When visions, dreams, tongues, prophecy, impressions or any extraordinary gift or inspiration conveys something out of harmony with the accepted revelations of the Church, or contrary to the decisions of its constituted authorities, Latter-day Saints may know that it is not of God, no matter how plausible it may appear. Also they should understand that directions for the guidance of the Church will come, by revelation, through the head. All faithful members are entitled to the inspiration of the Holy Spirit for themselves, their families, and for those over whom they are appointed and ordained to preside. But anything at discord with that which comes from God through the head of the Church is not to be received as authoritative or reliable. In secular as well as spiritual affairs, saints may receive divine guidance and revelation affecting themselves, but this does not convey authority to direct others and is not to be accepted when contrary to church covenants, doctrine or discipline, or to known facts, demonstrated truths, or good common sense. No person has the right to induce his fellow members of the church to engage in speculations or take stock in ventures of any kind on a specious claim of divine revelation or vision or dream, especially when it is in opposition to the voice of recognized authority. Local or general. The Lord's church is a house of order. It is not governed by individual gifts or manifestations, but by the order and power of the holy priesthood as sustained by the voice and vote of the church in its appointed conferences. The history of the church records many pretended revelations claimed by impostors or zealots who believed in the manifestations they sought to lead other persons to accept, and in every instance, disappointment, sorrow and disaster have resulted therefrom. Financial loss and sometimes utter ruin have followed. We feel it our duty to warn the Latter-day Saints against fake mining schemes which have no warrant for success beyond the professed spiritual manifestations of their projectors and the influence gained over the excited minds of their victims. We caution the saints against investing money or property in shares of stock which bring no profit to anyone but those who issue and trade in them. Fanciful schemes to make money for the alleged purpose of redeeming Zion or providing means for the salvation of the dead or other seemingly worthy objects should not deceive anyone acquainted with the order of the church and will result only in waste of time and labor, which might be devoted now to doing something tangible and worthy and of record on earth and in heaven. Be not led by any spirit or influence that discredits established authority, contradicts true scientific principles and discoveries, or leads away from the direct revelations of God for the government of the church. The Holy Ghost does not contradict its own revealings. Truth is always harmonious with itself. Piety is often the cloak of error. The counsels of the Lord through the channel he has appointed will be followed with safety. Therefore, O, ye Latter-day Saints, profit by these words of warning. Day. News, August 2, 1913, also imp. Era 16 1148 to 1149, September 1913. James E. Talmage, 1928. Several years ago, at the request of parties concerned, including some of the officials of the company operating the property, I made an examination of the ground and excavations thereon, and reported to the effect that I found the so-called mine wholly barren of ore, and that the geological conditions were such as to offer no indication or promise of ore of a commercial nature being discovered on the property. I have held the same opinion since the time of my examination, and hold it today. Furthermore, when I visited the property, I was told that the mining operations theretofore carried on, and then in progress, had been largely influenced and directed by alleged dreams and visions of supernatural character, received by certain of the company officials and other interested parties, by whom these statements were made known to me personally. I am now informed that claims of supernatural direction in operating this mine are still current, and that I am understood as having endorsed them. I absolutely disclaim having given the least credence to any such alleged manifestations, whether dream, vision or otherwise. To the contrary, immediately after making the examination and hearing the statements of persons claiming to have received supernatural aid in directing the work, and on many later occasions, I emphatically declared that I regarded the alleged manifestations as spurious, and that the setting forth of such claims, allegations or intimations as inducements to prospective purchasers of stock was wholly unjustifiable and fundamentally wrong. I reaffirm this now. Day. News, May 14, 1928, page 1 of Church News. Deseret News, Church reaffirms stand on Coil DREAM mine, 1932. The attitude of church officials concerning certain features in the mining operations of the Coil Mining Company at the Dreamer Relief Mine, east of Salem, remains the same today as it was expressed in a statement issued in 1913. It was declared Monday at the church offices. The reaffirming of their position came in answer to persistent reports that have reached the general authorities that stories are being circulated alleging that the church has changed its position in regard to the Dream Mine. The erroneous reports are that Dr. James E. Talmage of the Council of the 12 is ready to apologize to the mine officials for his past statements concerning the mine, and that he will tell the officials of the mine to go ahead, and that the general authorities are opposing Elder Talmage in his stand on the Dream Mine, that they have called him to account for his statements made in public, that his church position is in jeopardy unless he apologizes to the mine officials, and that the general authorities are themselves ready to tell the mine officials to go ahead. Day. News, September 19, 1932, page 1. Editorial, Dream Mines, 1946. Telephone inquiries are again coming in about the so-called Coil Dream Mine and reported sale of stock in that property. It is said that some persons of local prominence are again agitating the sale of stock in that mine, and in some instances have claimed to have received revelations that certain of their neighbors should buy the stock. It is also claimed in some instances, as it has been claimed in the past, that the church authorities are no longer opposed to the so-called supernatural basis upon which the mine is being operated, and some go so far as to quote Dr. James E. Talmage as saying that he admitted being mistaken in his earlier studies of the mine. Latter-day Saints should understand that at no time have church officials changed their attitude regarding this mine and its supernatural claims. On December 29, 1945, there was republished in the church section of the Deseret News a statement of the First Presidency of the Church warning members of the church away from schemes based on supernatural claims by which persons hope to get gain. Said the presidency, "We feel it our duty to warn the Latter-day Saints against mining schemes which have no warrant for success beyond the professed spiritual manifestations of their projectors and the influence gained over the excited minds of their victims. We caution the Saints against investing money or property in shares of stock which bring no profit to anyone but those who issue and trade in them. Financial schemes to make money for the alleged purpose of redeeming Zion or providing means for the salvation of the dead or other seemingly worthy objects should not deceive anyone acquainted with the order of the church." This statement was first prepared in the days of President Joseph F. Smith, and on December 29, 1945, was reiterated by the present First Presidency, who said on that date, "We commend the foregoing to the careful consideration of all members of the church at this time, many of whom are the victims of alluring representations regarding mining and other investments. When salesmen for dream mine stock come and tell their neighbors they have been impressed by the Lord, that the neighbors should buy some of this stock, let those neighbors beware and go and discuss the matter with their bishops and stake presidents." When claims are made that Dr. Talmage changed his mind about this mine, let all remember that such claims were made in the lifetime of Dr. Talmage, and in answer to them, he published in the Deseret News on May 14, 1928, a statement including the following: "Several years ago, at the request of parties concerned, including some of the officials of the company operating this Coil property, I made an examination of the ground and excavations thereon, and reported to the effect that I found the so-called mine wholly barren of ore, and that the geological condition was such as to offer no indications of the promise of ore discovery of commercial value on that property. I have held the same opinion since the time of my examination, and hold it today." In 1933, when the Coil mine was facing difficulty with the State Securities Commission, Dr. Frederick J. Pack, another Utah geologist, was employed to make an examination of the mine and report to the Securities Commission, which at that time was testing charges of illegal sale of stock in the mine. Dr. Pack reported, as published Jan. 21, 1933, in Salt Lake City newspapers, "I desire to state that in my judgment the Coil mining property offers no encouragement whatsoever for the future. The _ORE' bodies recently discovered are shown by assays to be worthless. This is also true of the ore in the mill bins awaiting treatment." After giving a technical description of geological conditions at the mine site, Dr. Pack further stated in his report that he has seldom, if ever, seen a mining prospect that exhibited such a complete absence of mineralization. "Throughout the entire property I am unable to find evidence of vein filling. At various times backers of this mine have reported the discovery of both gold and platinum, but their tests have failed under assay. However, the thing against which the authorities of the church warn the people is the claim of supernatural direction in this mine. All members of the church are urged to follow the advice of the general authorities of the church in this regard and avoid the disappointment that has come to many who have preferred to believe in the so-called dreams and visions of men seeking by supernatural means to operate mines." Day. News, September 7, 1946. Harold B. Lee, 1970. In the priesthood session of the 140th Annual Conference of the Church on April 4, 1970, President Harold B. Lee read the church statement of 1913 to reaffirm the official church position. Appendix 8. Deseret News, the family newspaper. Salt Lake City, Utah, Friday evening, April 16, 1948. Coil excommunicated. John H. Coyle, of Spanish Fork, Utah, was excommunicated from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints last night on a charge of insubordination to the rules and authority of the church. Action was taken by the Presidency and High Council of the Palmyra Stake in a meeting held at the stake offices in Spanish Fork. Appendix 9. John H. Coyle dies at age 84, funeral held today. John Hiram Coyle, 84, native of Spanish Fork, died Tuesday at 9 a.m. in the Payson Hospital of ailments due to advanced age. He was born in Spanish Fork August 14, 1864, as son of John H. and Adlinda Hillman Coyle, early pioneers. He was educated in the early day schools here and followed the occupations of farming and mining. He married Emily Holt, daughter of Peyton and Sarah Naomi Carr Holt, December 29, 1884, and to them were born 13 children. 9 grew to adulthood and 7 are now surviving. Mr. Coyle filled a mission for the LDS Church in the southern states and had served as bishop of the Leland Ward and as a bishop's counselor in Burley, Idaho. While chairman of ward teaching in 2nd Ward, he made an enviable record, which has been unequaled since. He was active in civic affairs. He is survived by 3 sons and 4 daughters, Leroy Coyle and Merrill Coyle, Spanish Fork, Ross Coyle, Mrs. Evelyn Stout, Mrs. Adlinda Duke, Mrs. Emma Wanward, Burley, Idaho, and Mrs. Lucille Waite, Pocatello, Idaho, 2 sisters, Mrs. Vidalia Davis and Mrs. Ellen Fillmore, Spanish Fork, 45 grandchildren and 57 great-grandchildren. Appendix 10. Section 111. Revelation given through Joseph Smith the prophet, at Salem, Massachusetts, August 6, 1836. HZ 2 465-466. 1-5, the Lord looks to the temporal needs of his servants. 6-11, he will deal mercifully with Zion, and arrange all things for the good of his servants. 1 the Lord your God, am not displeased with your coming this journey, notwithstanding your follies. 2 I have much treasure in this city for you, for the benefit of Zion, and many people in this city, whom I will gather out in due time for the benefit of Zion, through your instrumentality. 3 Therefore, it is expedient that you should form acquaintance with men in this city, as you shall be led, and as it shall be given you. 4 And it shall come to pass in due time, that I will give this city into your hands, that you shall have power over it, insomuch that they shall not discover your secret parts, and its wealth pertaining to gold and silver shall be yours. 5 Concern not yourselves about your debts, for I will give you power to pay them. 6 Concern not yourselves about Zion, for I will deal mercifully with her. 7 Tarry in this place, and in the regions round about. 8 In the place, where it is my will, that you should tarry, for the main, shall be signalized unto you by the peace and power of my Spirit, that shall flow unto you. 9 This place you may attain by hire. And inquire diligently concerning the more ancient inhabitants and founders of this city. 10 For there are more treasures than one for you in this city. 11 Therefore, be ye as wise as serpents, and yet without sin. And I will order all things for your good, as fast as ye are able to receive them. Amen. Appendix 11. Photographs. Ore car at entrance to the relief mine. Bishop John H. Coyle. Bishop Coyle's house at the mine.